politics is best understood by braiding two forms of
policing white supremacy, the enemy within. Both those phrases could be subject to some ambiguity. Why this title?
My co-author, Beth Zasloff, was something very simple and explained what the book is really trying to do. So policing white supremacy is about how law enforcement is ineffective in the way it addresses white supremacist and far-right militant violence, with instruction on how they can improve that performance, and more importantly, to recognize that it isn't just a law enforcement issue. This is something that giving law enforcement more powers isn't going to solve. In fact, that's part of the problem. And the enemy within was intentionally ambiguous, both because it somewhat references the idea that the way that law enforcement looks at white supremacist activity as a domestic issue when it's really international. There are white supremacists all over the world. These groups that engage in violence often network internationally. So this distinction, calling them domestic terrorists versus international terrorists, is part of the discrepancy in the way law enforcement addresses terrorism in the United States. But also the other ambiguous part is that a lot of the book focuses on affinity for these groups within law enforcement. So it's not just that these groups are outside law enforcement and need to be addressed by law enforcement, but that this is a problem that has festered within law enforcement since the beginning of history in this country.
Well, and many of our, certainly in the South in particular, many of the police departments started out as slave patrols, and as did, I mean, Patrick Henry gave a big speech about this at the ratifying convention for the Constitution, that without what became the Second Amendment, without something that explicitly authorized states to have militias and arm those militias, and he was specifically referring to the Virginia Slave Patrol. He was the largest owner of slaves in the state. That he wouldn't vote for the Constitution. So arguably even the state militias, what we call the National Guard, started out as the slave patrols. White supremacy and its involvement with police, I mean, it goes way back, not just to the 1870s when the Justice Department came out of the effort to push back against the Klan and the fight against Reconstruction, if I've got that right.
Absolutely, and it's easy to look at that as a remnant of history, but it persists. And after the Reconstruction period ended and Jim Crow laws were put in place and black codes all across the United States, it's often easy to assume this is a southern U.S. problem, but fugitive slave patrols went all across the nation. And during Jim Crow, there were also black codes in Midwestern states and northern states. Vigilante groups like the Ku Klux Klan were powerful in Southern California. So this has never been just a regional problem. It's always been within the entire country in the way that our society creates racial hierarchies, and the police are the ones who enforce those hierarchies. The towns where a person of color is met on one side of the town by a police officer who takes them to the other side of the town and says, don't be here past sundown. These laws and policies were always enforced by police.
So part of this has to do with how we define, in the modern context, how we define terrorism. This is the word du jour since 9/11, and or the word decade or whatever.
Right.
And here we've got this guy who blew himself up in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, left behind two manifestos. One of them said, fellow service members, veterans, and Americans, it's time to wake up. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. What better way to get my point across than with fireworks and explosives? Rally around Trump, Musk, Kennedy, and ride this wave to the highest hegemony for all Americans. He says, Americans must wake up purge the government and military. Military and vets must move on D.C. Militias facilitate and augment this activity until the purge is complete. He said, try peaceful means first, but prepare to fight to get the Dems out of the federal government and military by any means necessary. They all must go, and a hard reset must occur for our country to avoid collapse. If he was speaking not of Republican Democratic politics, but instead on behalf of Islam, and he had brown skin, he would have been labeled a terrorist instantly. And instead, I have not heard one single news report refer to this guy as a terrorist. What's going on with this?
That's right. The way that not just law enforcement, but the media talk about terrorism is highly politicized, and that's really part of the problem. As you said, it comes definitionally, this concept of terrorism is a highly politicized term, where it's applied not based on the type of conduct, but rather based on whether the government has a concern about that political cause or social movement, which is why you see the law enforcement response to activism that is meant to drive social change, particularly when it's led by people of color in this country, receive a tremendous amount of law enforcement attention, whereas white supremacist violence isn't even tallied. For years, we've been, and in fact, Congress passed a law requiring the FBI to document the number of domestic terrorism incidents, including breaking it down by white supremacists and the fatalities resulting thereof. And the FBI, as you said, for 25 years now, we've considered terrorism our number one priority, counterterrorism our number one priority, but they say that they don't collect domestic terrorism incident data. They don't know how many people white supremacists killed this year, or last year, or any other year.
I want to get to your experience being undercover with these people, but it seems to me that it's not just race, that it's almost a caste system, certainly a class system. I mean, you've got obviously, race a big factor in this one. Dylan Roof killing a half a dozen people, black people in a church, and the police drive him to a Burger King because he says he's hungry, he hasn't had lunch, on the way to jail. And then you contrast that with, Luigi, who shot a white multimillionaire CEO, and they march him to jail with a phalanx. I mean, with a military escort virtually, as if he was Osama bin Laden. The contrast is frankly shocking. And they never prosecuted Dylan Roof as a terrorist, as I recall. I think he was just prosecuted for murder, whereas Luigi is being prosecuted for terrorism as well. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me there's a differentiation in how the FBI and the Justice Department address white supremacist violence. And part of that comes from the history. One of the frustrations I've had over the last several years is that a very widespread concept or idea by people who have previously been federal prosecutors who argue there is no domestic terrorism law. That's false, absolutely false. You can open the U.S. Code. There's an entire chapter called terrorism that defines both international and domestic terrorism simply by geography. Terrorism that occurs in the United States is domestic. Terrorism that occurs outside the United States is international. But they create these domestic terrorism categories by ideology. And then because they're not collecting data about who are the most persistent threats and who are the most serious threats, i.e. killing people, they're able to pick and which groups to prioritize. And they tend to prioritize groups that are engaged in less activity and less serious violence.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Student Etiquette puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmann.com.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction, and it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding two forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested. Special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status. Fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive sum, but identity conflict is zero sum. The book Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, are we on? Hey, happy Friday. Shabbat Shalom. Juma Mubarak. Let's see. What am I missing? TGIF? There we go. It is the end of the week. It's Anything Goes Friday. It's you and me for the next 3 hours. No guests today. We've got a lot to talk about. We don't have any guests, right? No, we don't. There you go. Okay, the GOP's 60-year conspiracy to kill our democracy. None dare call it treason. I will. Also, this plane crash in Washington, D.C. shows that Donald Trump can't handle a crisis. We're really going to have to hold our breath over the next 4 years. And the FAA report on the crash is out, and it's an indictment of the Republicans. I'll tell you about that in a moment. We also have another hair on fire moment with Elon Musk being involved in our government. And people are trying to simplify the message. In the third hour of our program, is it AI facial recognition? Is using AI facial recognition to identify, arrest, and deport anti-Netanyahu protesters in the U.S. coming up next? Sure looks like it. I'll tell you about that. Also, they're both dangerous. Senators worried that both Patel and Tulsi Gabbard refused a constitutional pledge, refused to say that they would put the Constitution above their loyalty to Donald Trump. Both of them said this. And so here we are. Shouldn't everyone be worried about this? I think so. So my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com, titled, our daily take, is titled, "The GOP's 60-Year Conspiracy to Kill Our Democracy. None dare call it treason, but I will." And, this is kind of a follow-up to Wednesday's piece on my daily take on Wednesday on Hartmann Report and also here on this program. I mentioned, almost in passing, excuse me, Russell Kirk and the origins of today's hard-right GOP. And a few people were like, who's that? And what does this have to do with anything? So, I thought I'd write a piece to tell you the backstory. In a way, it started in 1964, although it actually started in 1951, which I'll get to in just a moment. But in 64, when I was 13 years old, my dad gave me a copy of John Stormer's book, None Dare Call It Treason, which convinced me and my dad and his friends in the local Republican Party that the State Department was filled with communists. And in fact, I mean, and this was, you know, a John Birch Society operation. The John Birch Society in the late 1950s had been heavily funded by Fred Koch, the fossil fuel billionaire, in opposition to Earl Warren signing the Supreme Court decision that integrated schools in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, the Topeka, Kansas the Board of Education. And, you know, and then they went down that right-wing road from there to this anti-communist hysteria. And really, you can even take it a step beyond that. You go back to 1951, which is the year that Russell Kirk published his book, The Conservative Mind. And the subtitle of his book is From Burke to Eliot. Well, you know, who are Burke and Eliot? Eliot was T.S. Eliot, who in the early 20th century, you know, is the poet, the Hollow Men, and all these kind of things, cats. But he was also a hardcore right-winger. T.S. Eliot is British. And Burke was an Irish right-wing politician. I'm not sure he was a politician, actually, but he wrote and spoke extensively about politics and about public policy in the late 1700s. It was Edmund Burke that Thomas Paine visited on his way to France to get arrested during the French Revolution. He didn't intend to get arrested. James Monroe had to bail him out, who would later become president. But it was Burke. He spent 2 weeks at Burke's house in Ireland and got in such a fight with Burke about public policy that Thomas Paine wrote an entire book called The Rights of Man as a rebuttal to Burke. So that's a kind of anti-American. I mean, you know, Burke actually supported the American Revolution, but, you know, he did not support the idea of working class people voting. He famously said, you know, the occupation of a hairdresser or a working tallow chandler, candlemaker, cannot be a matter of honor to any person, to say nothing of a number of other more servile employments. Such descriptions of men ought not to suffer oppression from the state, but the state suffers oppression if such as they, either individually or collectively, are permitted to rule. He's talking about, you know, voting or running for public office. And he adds in this, you think you are combating prejudice, but you are actually at war with nature. In other words, those middle class, working class people, they're intellectually inferior. That's why they're not rich. Now, in 1951, I mean, the entire first chapter of Russell Kirk's book is devoted to Edmund Burke and how wonderful it was, and how Burke said, you know, we have to have classes and orders in society. Basically, white men need to run everything. Wealthy white men need to run everything. This was not a new idea. I mean, Europe had been running this way for 1,000 years. But, you know, it's generally considered the conservative idea. And Kirk, in his book, basically was predicting, I mean, not so much specifically in his book, but more generally, predicting that if the 1950 generation of hairdressers and tallow chandlers, candlemakers, you know, college students, women, working class people, people of color, if they ever got close to the kind of social and political power that wealthy white men had, that it would create absolute chaos here in the United States. It would destroy our country. Now, keep in mind, this was a time when racial segregation was legal and brutally enforced. Young people couldn't vote. The voting age was 21. Campuses were almost entirely all male. Both abortion and birth control were illegal in most states. Women couldn't open checking accounts or get credit cards without a husband, brother, or father's signature. But nonetheless, throughout the 1950s, Kirk's warnings were largely ignored. I mean, you know, like I said, Buckley and Goldwater, you know, loved him, but that was about it. But then in 1961, the birth control pill was put on the market and approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And the Vietnam War began to heat up a few years later. And suddenly, you had women demanding, now that they could control their fertility, demanding equality in the workplace. The women's rights movement, the women's liberation movement, it was kicked off in the mid-'60s. And you had the anti-war movement and SDS, young people. And you had the truly effective and peak impact of the civil rights movement with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And you had, by the late 60s, you had many cities in America on fire because black people were protesting having unarmed black men killed by police. Every single one of those so-called riots started with a cop killing a black person who was unarmed. Every single one of them. Go back and look it up. And then on top of this, you had the Arab oil embargo of the 70s, which jacked inflation. And so throughout the 70s, you had all these working class people who were union members, and keep in mind, a third of America was unionized back then, going on strike, demanding higher wages to make up for inflation. So all of this just completely freaked out the wealthy, white, male oligarchs who were funding the Republican Party and the John Birch Society. And they became convinced that Russell Kirk was actually right back in 1951 when he said that if women ever get this kind of power, if young people ever get this kind of power, if black people ever get this kind of power, if queer people ever get this kind of power, it's going to bring America to its knees. It's going to produce moral decay and social chaos. And so, they got Ronald Reagan in office, and Reagan's mandate was, let's dial back this damn middle class that's empowering these women and black people and young people and working class people to make demands of us rich guys, basically. And this was their solution. And it was so effective that Reagan took us from a third of us being unionized to fewer than 10% of us by the end of the Reagan and Bush 12-year era. And on top of that, and froze wages basically till this day. I mean, they've been creeping up under Biden, but, we're still seeing union density actually going down rather than up right now. And of course, Reagan just basically shut down the National Labor Relations Board. So it's going to be almost impossible to create a union during the during the Trump administration here. It was Reagan who massively cut taxes on rich people, raised taxes on working class people 11 times, put taxes on Social Security income, put taxes on unemployment insurance income, ended the tax deductibility of credit card loans, ended the tax deductibility of car loans, ended the tax deductibility of student debt interest, all things that working class people used while he was expanding the number of loopholes, the number of tax loopholes, the tax deductions that rich people could take. He dropped the top tax bracket from 74% down to 25%. At that time, there were only 7 billionaires in America. He declared war on labor unions and took out PATCO. They pushed through the GATT and WTO, or the precursors to them, and they negotiated NAFTA. Clinton signed all those things, and it worked. It worked. It gutted America, and this is how we got to where we are. And now we've got this open fascist, an apparent friend of authoritarian Russia as president. He's putting in place people and policies that could turn America into an authoritarian state like Russia or Hungary. We're literally facing that authoritarian future, bringing this back to John Stormer, that I read about in None Dare Call It Treason. John Stormer's prophecy has been fulfilled, but not by communists in the State Department, but rather by oligarchs and neo-fascists in the White House and Congress and the Supreme Court. Perhaps none dare call it treason, but I do. I dare call it treason. I'll be right back, 17 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Let's talk about this plane crash and, what's really going on here. And then I'll pick up your calls. It's Anything Goes weekend also here, so stay tuned. And welcome back, Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I love your op-ed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I did a little research on my own. I wanted to find out more about Reagan. And on August 3rd, 1981, 12,000 professional air traffic controllers walked off the job. They wanted higher pay and shorter hours under the Reagan presidency.
They also wanted improved technology.
Yes.
They wanted the computers
and
upgraded.
Reagan fired all of them. He wanted to prosecute the leaders. Reagan ended up sending a letter to Robert E. Pauley, the president of PATCO, where Reagan stated, I will take care of whatever steps are necessary to provide air traffic controllers with the best equipment available. And then he said, and I will adjust staff levels for the public safety. And then the air traffic controllers received a 32-hour work week and a $10,000 pay increase with better benefits for retirement. And the thing about this, he offered, it was crazy. It was $105 million up front he offered for their pay raises for the next 3 years. And the reason, oh my God, the reason I'm saying this is Trump treated all the air traffic controllers he denigrated them, insulted them, and blamed them as incompetent. So to all the air traffic controllers, they need to stand together and shut down the skies. And here's I feel I have people that believe this too. My cousin was saying this would create so much chaos, and that's what Trump is all about. He's about chaos. And I don't know how we're ever going to win with him, but that would be a huge shutdown, and I would love your opinion.
I think if we still had PATCO, I mean, PATCO is a feisty union. The group that is representing air traffic controllers now is a little more passive. They don't have the power. I'm not sure that they're actually an NLRB union. But I think you're right, Jessica, and I think were this 1981, the controllers probably would have walked off the job when Trump came out and said, "Oh, this is all because of black people and women." This crash.
Right.
And it turns out, by the way, that the pilot of the helicopter was white. The pilot of the aircraft was a white man. They were both white men, and the air traffic controller is a white man who's got to be feeling almost suicidal right now. Can you imagine?
Yes, and stuff like this has happened before. In 1970, it was called a sick-out strike, a protest against the FAA. Yeah. And 2000, they just didn't show up for work. Yep. And they got better. They did get raises, and they made the salary so high that they attracted more air traffic controllers. So strikes can work, and I'm so happy you said that I'm thankful of your opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Jessica, great rant, and thanks for tracking down the details there. That was great. Appreciate the call. 21 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. We'll talk about the aircraft accident in Washington, D.C., right above where I used to live. And then pick up your calls. It's Anything Goes Weekend, so stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So have you noticed that the Republicans are pretty much not talking about a constitutional convention anymore? They used to be gung-ho to rewrite the Constitution. You know, they wanted to put corporate personhood in there. They wanted to change it so that women can't vote. They wanted to do away with the election of senators, repeal the 17th Amendment, take us back to them being appointed by the states. They had all these weird, they wanted to outlaw labor unions, all these weird ideas, but they've stopped talking about it. I mean, they're still moving forward on it, but it's not. Project 2025, for example, their ultimate talking document, does not have one single mention in it about a constitutional convention. Why would that be? Well, it's because the Supreme Court is doing their work for them. I mean, you know, just they have overturned Article 2. They've overturned the First, Fourth, Ninth, and 14th Amendments. They've overturned Article 1, Section 7. All the details of this whole thing are over at HartmannReport.com. You got to check it out.
It started back in '64, a whisper in the halls, Goldwater's morning call, behind the country's walls. Stormer's book was passed around, fear was set in stone. The rich men lit the torches, claimed the Reds would take our home. They sold the fear, they sold the lie, wrapped in flags and battle cries. The GOP's long game, 60 years in disguise, selling fear to the people, feeding power to the lies. They call it saving freedom, but they built an iron cage. None dare call it treason, but I will on this stage. Russell Kirk laid out the plan, keep the working class in line, let the wealthy
welcome
pull the
back,
strings.
24 minutes past the hour. Conservative Anglican, I mentioned this yesterday, this Anglican priest, he's a member of the Anglican Catholic Church, which is kind of an offshoot of the Anglican Church. Calvin Robinson, this guy did the Hitler salute at a anti-abortion rally a couple of days ago. And his denomination, the ACC, the Anglican Catholic Church, just fired him. They said, while we cannot say what was in Mr. Robinson's heart when he did this, his action appears to have been an attempt to curry favor with certain elements of the American political right by provoking its opposition. He's been warned that online trolling and other such actions, whether in service of right or left, are incompatible with a priestly vocation and told to desist. We believe that those who mimic the Nazi salute, even as a joke or an attempt to troll their opponents, trivialize the horror of the Holocaust and diminish the sacrifice of those who fought against its perpetrators. So they fired him. He tried to say, oh, I was just joking. And they're like, nah, you know, that works for Elon Musk. It's not going to work for you. Now, this aircraft, Donald Trump came out immediately yesterday, you know, after the crash and said, this is the fault of the FAA hiring women, black people, and disabled people. He was quite explicit about it. And then J.D. Vance came out and even told the story about how he knew of a white man who had tried to get a job as an air traffic controller and couldn't because the job was given to a black woman or something like that. I mean, it's just the racism here and the misogyny and, you know, just hate. I mean, that's what these guys run on, was just amazing. Well, now we know that the helicopter pilot was a white man, the airline pilot was a white man, and the air traffic controller was a white man. So, and none of them were disabled or had any, you know, physical or intellectual disabilities. This, you know, Jonathan Lemire over on Morning Joe this morning says, just like in 2020, Trump uses a national calamity to score political points and denigrate his foes. The first crisis of the young administration, a moment to console a stunned and grieving nation, Trump repeatedly implied that the crash was the fault of his Democratic predecessors and DEI policies. Yeah, you think? He goes on to say, he couldn't handle the idea that this crisis is suddenly something he has to deal with, so he tries to pass the buck to others. He tried to score political points, but it was also about shifting blame. Yep. Meanwhile, the staffing of the FAA had been frozen by Republicans. I'll tell you about that after the break, and I'll pick up your calls. It's Anything Goes Friday, Anything Goes Weekend. We'll be right back. 27 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, speaking the truths that Donald Trump would really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back with you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Stay tuned. Right back with you on the other side of this break. Book today in the Thom Hartmann University Book Club is Trump U, Promises, Lies, and Corruption, My Battle with Donald Trump's Fake University by Art Cohen with Dan Good. This is from Chapter 1, The Art and the Deal. I was in a vulnerable place. I found myself jobless in early 2009 after my consumer electronics company went through a forced sale. I'd poured my life into Ariel Inc. You might remember our Audio Bug FM transmitters, ladybug-shaped devices that aired music from portable devices over a car radio. After Apple's iPod became all the rage, we developed, manufactured, and licensed products for major retailers and brands such as Best Buy's Dynex, Iriver, Kensington, SanDisk, XM Radio, and Delphi. Later, we looked to expand our wireless music transmission offerings with our own i21 brand, working seamlessly with the debut in 2007 of a new iPhone. Everything was going well until it wasn't. The consumer electronics industry was hit hard by the 2008 recession. Our major investor wanted to restructure the company and install new management. I was out as CEO in 2009. I wanted to find something new and fast. It wasn't a great time to be unemployed. The national economy was tanking, and to top it off, Silicon Valley isn't a cheap place to live. I worried about providing for my wife and 2 sons. At age 44, I found myself at a crossroads, an inflection point in my career. After spending 5 years as a CEO, I wanted to do something different and carve a new path. And then I came across a special invitation in the mail and a full-page ad in the San Jose Mercury News promoting an opportunity. Do you think you can profit in this market? You can, and I'll show you how, proclaimed the advertiser's headline underneath a photo of real estate developer Donald Trump. The ad promised the opportunity to learn from Donald Trump's hand-picked experts. He's the most celebrated entrepreneur on earth. He's earned more in a day than most people do in a lifetime. He's living a life many men and women only dream about, and now he's ready to share with Americans like you the Trump process for investing in today's once-in-a-lifetime real estate market. Come to this free introductory class, and you'll learn from Donald Trump's hand-picked instructors a systematic method for investing in real estate that anyone can use effectively. You'll learn foreclosure investing from the inside out. You'll learn how to finance your deals using other people's money. You'll learn how to overcome your fear of getting started. End quote. The ad featured a guarantee attributed to the man himself. I can turn anyone into a successful real estate investor, including you. So, why not me? Donald Trump was a name I trusted. I grew up in Philadelphia, less than 100 miles from Trump's home base, New York City, so I was familiar with his success as a real estate developer and as an author of the 1987 bestseller, The Art of the Deal. I'd made the hour-long drive to Atlantic City, New Jersey a couple times, and his last name was splashed across the casinos, TRUMP, and flashing lights. I consider the name Trump synonymous with success and wealth. At least that's what it meant for me back then. During the mid-'80s, while a student at Drexel University, I was one of the co-founding members of the D-Users, widely acknowledged as the first Macintosh users group. I was invited to a Hollywood-style event called Going National, hosted by Drexel on its campus. There, I met the legendary Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple. His inspiring talk that day imagined future computers using artificial intelligence to have conversations with the dead. Not literally, but using inputs known about, for example, Abraham Lincoln. The AI would bring Lincoln to life so you could have a modern-day conversation with him as if he were alive today. Jobs' talk inspired me to lead a team tasked during a competition with imagining the personal computer of the year 2000. There we were, to present our vision with an impressive panel. Science fiction writer Ray Bradbury, futurist Alvin Toffler, education writer and historian Diane Ravitch, computer pioneer Alan Kay, and Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. A team from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign won the competition. They envisioned a tablet device that sounded an awful lot like the eventual iPad. During a luncheon, I got to sit at a table with Bradbury, and we began talking. He was amiable. He told me how his writing career didn't take off right away. He kept at it, day by day, year by year, and eventually success and fame found him. I love science fiction, and Fahrenheit 451 is one of my favorite books. Besides my father, Bradbury probably inspired me more than anyone else as a writer, something I enjoy doing in my spare time. The Project 2000 contest was beneficial in another way. It allowed me to connect with Apple employees and give them my resume. By 1989, I was moving to California as an Apple employee. I worked as an engineer at Apple until the mid-'90s, during the time before Steve Jobs returned to the company. I left to join a company called General Magic, where I worked on product and project management. During my time there, I bumped into a French-born computer programmer who said his wife came up with an idea about selling stuff from around the house online. Everybody laughed about it. I guess Pierre Omidyar got the last laugh. His creation, AuctionWeb, was later renamed eBay and became one of the world's leading e-commerce companies. I bounced around several tech companies in Silicon Valley, including Oracle, and Philips Semiconductors. At one point, I tried my hand at law school, taking classes at night. Philips was picking up the tab. Classes were challenging and my head wasn't in it. It was a big commitment and I ended up only going for a year. My passion remained with high tech. After moving to California, I didn't keep close tabs on Donald Trump. I wasn't aware of his casino empire cratering or his massive, massive debt. The book is Trump U by Art Cohen with Dan Good. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Wake up with the sunrise, feeling so alive. Turn that radio on, let your spirit fly. You got a thought to
Welcome
share,
back,
or
44
something
minutes
to
past
disclose.
the hour, and this is just incredible. An internal report from the Federal Aviation Administration found that, in reality, the tower staffing at Reagan National Airport, DCA, was, quote, not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic. That's literally verbatim from the Federal Aviation Administration. It wasn't black people, like Donald Trump said. It wasn't women, like Donald Trump said. It wasn't dwarfs, like Donald Trump said. It was that there was only one controller handling both the military traffic of the helicopters on one frequency and the civilian traffic of the jetliners on another frequency. And it should have been two controllers. I mean, it's not unusual to go to one controller, like, you know, when things are really slow, like overnight, stuff like that. But this was not that. This was not during that really slow period. So where does this start? Well, January 20th, Donald Trump fired the FAA director. Why? Because the guy had launched an investigation into SpaceX. And Elon Musk got pissed off, so Trump fires him, fires the FAA director. The day after, January 21st, Trump freezes all hiring of air traffic controllers. January 22nd, Trump disbands the Aviation Safety Advisory Committee. January 28th, Donald Trump sends a buyout retirement ransom letter to all of the air traffic controllers saying, hey, if you want to quit, please do so now. We'll pay your salaries for 8 months. And then January 29th, first mid-air collision in 16 years. Are we surprised? The House Republicans' 2025 budget proposal, which is we're looking at right now, the budget that they're proposing, cuts funding to the FAA, which, by the way, is so understaffed as a result of previous Republican budget cuts that controllers are often working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, which is not good. It's not good for the controllers, not good for air safety. The House Republican 2025 budget proposes cutting FAA funding by 26%. Back in 2023, they also wanted to cut funding to the FAA. They didn't quite get what they were able to do was basically freeze funding rather than cutting it. But they wanted to cut it. And so now we've got this internal report. The tower at Reagan National Airport, the old National Airport, DCA, only has 19 fully certified controllers. The FAA says there should be 30. But, you know, Trump's got a hiring freeze, and he's gutting the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, and his FAA chief was fired, and I mean, it's a cluster. It's a mess. Thank you, Republicans. 37 minutes past the hour. What's on your mind today? Chris in Littleton, Colorado. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Yeah, good morning, Tom. The current regime cheated in 101 different ways to barely win by a thin margin. And the reason they won is because many people sat at home and did not vote.
I agree.
And now every American...
Although, I would say that the main reason they won was because Republicans succeeded in getting at least 4 million votes, either not counted after they had been cast, or preventing people from voting by throwing their names off voting rolls.
But the solution to that is to vote in overwhelming numbers so that they can't cheat.
Yes, that's not a bad thing, and that's what we've been doing up to this point. And every year they knock more people off the voting rolls. You know, in previous years it might have been 2 million, now it's 4 million. I think the solution is to pass legislation, and obviously this is not going to happen when Republicans are in office, that says that voting is a right in America, just like in every other democratic country in the world.
Yeah,
Truly
and the
democratic.
midterm is less than 2 years away. We need to start supporting candidates that represent people and not corporations and rich people.
I agree. I think it's 641 days from now, but I could be wrong. But yeah, it's fewer than 2 years from now, and we've got to get our act together. Chris, thank you very much. Jerry in Venice, California. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind today?
The person from Chicago that talked about chaos.
Yeah, Jessica.
Well, yes, the Saturday Night Live needs to do a skit with Greg Palast and Harris and chaos. The old Maxwell Smart. You know,
yeah.
Harris could, yeah, I'm telling
You're
you,
dating
man.
yourself,
You
Jerry.
need to put it in every time they do something crazier. You just put it on. Put on another skit.
CHAOS. Yes. I don't
Yeah,
remember what the
you can't
acronym
get
stood
Greg.
for, but-
You can't get Greg on mainstream TV or anything.
Right.
That would do it.
Yeah.
Gumshoe.
Yeah. Yeah. We need the Smothers Brothers back too. Jerry, thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Steve in Lake Oswego, Oregon. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, happy Friday, Tom.
Thank you.
Hey,
Back at you.
building on what your previous caller said, I wanted to talk to you today about CCI. That is chaos, corruption, and incompetence of the Republicans and Trump administration. I think we need to make CCI the pejorative acronym that the right-wingers have made DEI. And I think if we just continue to put that out, Pete Hegseth, he's a CCI hire. Donald Trump, the CCI administration. I think you have the bullhorn that you have, and you have Mark Pocan and Ro Khanna and others, that we could get this out in the lexicon. CCI. I know that DEI started from some right-wing shouter, and it has become now common language that the public knows that when they hear DEI, they know what that stands for.
Yeah.
We need to get CCI in that same kind of level. And you have my permission if you want to broadcast this or use it in your everyday conversations or when you talk to politicos that, we need to get CCI, chaos, corruption, incompetence.
I got
the
it, Steve.
Republican
I got
culture of CCI.
I got it. Keep thinking. That's a good one. Thank you. CC in Northbrook, Illinois. Hey, CC, what's on your mind today?
Sad Friday, Tom. But
Indeed.
WEI will be a better one. W being white and whatever the two acronyms left after that. But anyway, Tom, man, I'm hurt from that Greg Palast report. I'm on the mat. I need to take my own advice. You're talking about stealing somebody's joy. That report, and I've been trying to verify it with the EAC, and I'm sure Greg Palast he's got a statement from the EAC about how many people were knocked off.
Yeah.
But anyway, Tom, I don't go for this racist stuff. I'm 59 years old, Tom. I'm from Mississippi. I benefited from the 1965 rights.
Mm-hmm.
I've exploited it to the max. I'm blessed. I'm not covered under FDIC. I'm covered under SPIC, if you know what that means.
I don't.
And so money equals freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get distracted by this racism. If anything, make sure you look at the bank. This may be the biggest stick-up in American history. Don't get caught up in this racism. I've dealt with racism to the fullest. If you knew my story, from the time I walked out of corporate America with my pockets full, you would know I understand this game. Mm-hmm. And don't be distracted by this racism. I was born under the stars and bars.
No, I get that. I get that, CC. It looks to me like what we have, what these right-wing billionaires have been trying to produce in America basically since the John Birch Society days, after the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, is a caste system. It's a highly stratified, rigidified class system based on economics. But it requires a large underclass, and it's very easy for these rich white guys to slot certain people who can be easily identified, people whose skin is darker than them,
yes.
and women into that lowest caste. I mean, so I don't think you can disentangle racism and misogyny from this.
No. And let me finish this real quick, Tom, because I want to go to this leadership thing that you were talking about. Well, you had some good points, though, that you have a good plan about messaging and all that. But the fault in any plan that anybody comes up with, we have a mass failure in leadership. Even if you came up with the excellent plan that you have nobody to deliver it. And so my solution is that your power, you underestimate your power. You're the best show in town. And what you need to do is wield your power. You need these, like I said, Miss Harris should have came on your show. All the high level, they have to come through free speech. This is the only thing, we're down to this. And we got to fight, Tom. You are the leader right now. That's not saying great things about the leaders we have, and that's not against you. You're a great leader. And that's unfortunate that we have to follow a radio host.
Yeah.
We're waiting on a leader.
Give
us a message. Give us a fight. We're ready.
I wrote this thing last week, and I went off on a rant about it. Where are the damn Democratic leaders? Adam Kinzinger. I mean, I played that whole 3-minute clip of him here on this program, or 2.5 minutes.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Forget him. Hey, he's a seven.
Yeah. It's like, where is the Democratic leadership? CC, thanks for the call, and thanks for your kind words. I'm really hopeful that Monday, with a new DNC chair, we're going to see this party hit the ground running. If we don't, I'm going to be just beside myself. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Exposing the con in conservative. I'll be back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Chris in Northampton, Massachusetts. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. First, thank God you're here. The story that you were talking about, the crash, it made me think, does this kind of technically make Trump partially responsible for murder? And
I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that, his trying to blame this on black people and women is obscene and hypocrisy, just personified. I mean, dictionary definition of hypocrisy.
Right. Well, anyway, my main point is, I'll probably be the wacky call of the day, but I was so upset this week. I'm in Massachusetts here, that I was considering calling McGovern and Warren and telling them to get together with other Democratic states and get the National Guard together and head to Washington. Because, I've done a lot of studying in a lot of different areas, and this certainly feels like a coup to me.
Yeah. So, they are going to Washington. Congress is back in session next week. What am I? Oh, you meant, like in the sense of Adam Kinzinger's demand, why are you guys home in your districts this week? Is that what you're talking about?
No, say that again, please.
When you said you want them to go back to Washington, I'm assuming that
I want the National Guard from every Democratic state to head to Washington and do what they can. I mean, it feels like a coup.
You do that, you're starting a civil war, Chris. That's
well, I know. That's why it's the wacky call of the day. But, I'm just saying the thought crossed my mind because I'm that worried.
I get it. Chris, take a breath. The opposition is really starting to find its footing, and Trump is really starting to screw up in big ways. His approval numbers are in the tank. I think it's going to get a lot worse for him, and I'm increasingly optimistic that we can make it through this. We'll see. It's going to be a tough one, but Chris, thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate that.
Good talking to you, Chris. Thanks for the call. Frank in Lakewood, California. Hey, Frank, what's up?
Hey, Tom. It's good to talk to you again. I'm going to ask a question, and I don't want it to come off as snide or condescending or anything like that. But I want to ask, have you read Trump v. Anderson?
The decision?
Yeah. Yes. Have you read it?
I have read little slices of it, but no, I haven't read the entire decision. This is the decision that granted Trump the immunity. Is that what you're talking about? Or no, this is the decision that put Trump back on the ballot.
That put Trump back on the ballot. Yeah. Exactly. A lot of people interpret that decision as exempting Trump from, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and it does.
Well, it exempts everybody because it says that section of the amendment is not self-executing. That Congress has to pass a law to put that into effect, and Congress didn't do it. I mean, I did read that part of it.
Okay.
That was their whole rationale.
If you read the entire, okay, well.
They also said that the states can't enforce it because it's a federal law. The states can't enforce it unless federal legislation authorized the states. Now, arguably, under the Anderson decision, Congress could get together and prevent Trump from being on the ballot. But, we already tried that. That was called impeachment. It didn't work out. Frank, I got to run. Thanks for the call. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. I have 8 suggestions for Democrats for messaging. Democrats seem to have a messaging problem right now. First, Democrats must frame the fight in simple moral terms. Don't be wonky like, hey, we need to expand social safety net. No, say no child in America should go to bed hungry. Second, Democrats need to stop playing defense and instead seize the populist high ground. Like when FDR said, they are unanimous in their hate for me and I welcome their hatred. Third, ruthlessly define the Republican opposition and the morbidly rich oligarchs who own them. Fourth, tell stories instead of facts. Reagan did this with the black welfare queen. He had to lie about it, but we've got lots of great stories. That's number 4. There's 4 more. And they're all over at HartmannReport.com. The title of the article is, If Obama Had Sent a Mob to Kill a Cop, Republicans Would Never Let You Forget It. And it's all about how Democrats can reinvent their messaging to start winning elections big. Check it out. Welcome back. It is 9 minutes before the hour. Coming up on 8 minutes before the hour. Melissa in Old Town, Maine. Hey, Melissa, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I wanted to talk to you about my journey in the whole process of all of this. I am married to a police officer who is a Trump supporter, and
oh my goodness,
we've been married for a lot. Yes, and we've been married for a long time, so I've had a lot of education in my life. I have headphones in a lot, listening to podcasts, and I'm a grad student. But I have that cocktail party hearing, and I think it's important to hear what's going on everywhere.
Yeah.
So I know all the MAGA lingo, the rush, things like that. So I'm kind of well trained for all the things that people throw at you.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to do my graduate independent study on all of last week, observing Trump's page for hours, and the same thing with Biden, because I didn't want to be biased, but, or the liberal pages and the conservative pages. I ended up being on Trump's pages. It was kind of like I was working my job. I would go in and out, go to lunch, and observe things. And Are
you talking social media pages? I don't know what you mean by pages.
His Facebook page. His Facebook page. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Mostly the Facebook page. I apologize. I'm a little nervous.
That's okay, Melissa.
So, yeah. So the whole time I'm on Trump's page, it's like my spidey. I don't know. It's like my spidey senses are going off because my father was in the Fernald School in Massachusetts, where they were practicing eugenics on immigrant children. My father wasn't an immigrant, but his parents were, and his father died when they came. Well, they had been here a while. I don't know. You know how those old family stories, you can't really. Sometimes, you don't know where it all ended up. You don't get those answers before they got here. But
sure,
they came over, and my dad's father died from his mom, and this is back the 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
And his mom's got, a bunch of Portuguese immigrant children. And back then, women, you know how it goes. You were just discussing that about, how women were treated. And so he was in there several years.
Where are you going with this, Melissa? What's the point you're trying to make?
Well, I went in on Trump's page. My point is, it's so hard, but I went on Trump's page and I watched for hours and hours and hours. And I watched the arrogance go up when Trump pardoned last week. I watched the arrogance inflame up, and I watched the comments really increase. And then he posted a video of Selena Gomez crying, and the comments on there. I have so much data, research, and screenshots. The comments were cruel, cruel.
Well, this is Trump's people revel in cruelty.
Yeah.
They revel in his cruelty. And you were talking about I don't like the other. I'm trying so hard not to other. It's not, because I think our wording of us versus them in society is hurting us. So I'm trying to not do that. But and I'm sorry here, but I have been kind of traumatized because of my father told me the stories of what happened in Fernald. And there is a book on it called The State Boys Rebellion. Have you ever read that? I've not. No, don't know about
it. I think that you would find it very interesting. My father is in that. He was a kid that would go down. And anyway, I'm going off because I'm so proud of my dad, and I'm so proud of the resiliency that he gave my family. And, I kept thinking when I was on there and writing data, I was talking to my advisor yesterday because, we had to go over the NASA social work ethics, about safety, and I just feel like my dad's ringing my doorbell kind of a thing. And I know it sounds so weird, but I just got the willies. But anyway, so I'm doing this research project, and I know it's a lot, but the things that I saw in there, and so like when George Clooney was on a show talking against him, he would post things quickly at the same time. I have to monitor what's going on in society and what's going on Trump's page, because there's a Trump society, and it's very clear they don't watch. Most of them seem like they don't watch any other news programs except for Newsmax, Fox.
Yeah.
And I don't want to generalize that.
They're very happy to live in their little bubble.
Yeah, and that scares me. You said a couple of weeks ago Trump supporters scare you more than anybody, and they do, because for me it's all distraction. He put on the video on his page of when they took the illegal immigrants away, and he posted it and was like something like losers. I have the screenshots, and the thing of it is they would delete stuff, and so my advisor wanted me to put my toe in the water and say, what happens if you comment? So one time I was like, I'm just curious, because they keep going on about Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm just curious.
They've got their memes. They keep recycling them. Melissa, I'm sorry I'm out of time. But thank you for the call, and thanks for sharing your story with us. It's we're hitting the top of the hour here. On the other side of this break, we have another hair on fire moment with Elon Musk tinkering with our government. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today is Microtrends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, The Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together, they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns in change and microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll. The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choice is leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies, which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations who in their own youth led a rebellion have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming. But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, but which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now microtrends squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass-produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our weekend program here. That's Anything Goes Weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. What's on your mind? We'll get to all that in just a moment. I did want to share with you this hair on fire moment. Apparently, the Department of Treasury, is responsible for all the government's money. And they have a division that writes the checks, right? And this is interesting. A new report, Brad Reed reporting over at Raw Story, a new report from the Washington Post claiming that allies of ex-owner Elon Musk have successfully pushed out the highest-ranking official at the United States Treasury Department over Musk's demands to access highly sensitive government payment information. This is according to the Washington Post. Longtime Treasury official David A. Librick is, quote, expected to leave the agency soon, end quote, despite the fact that Donald Trump just appointed him acting Treasury Secretary last week. Why? Because apparently he had a dispute with Musk's surrogates over access to the payment system the U.S. government uses to disperse trillions of dollars every year. Literally trillions, some, $4 or $5 trillion. Sarah Posner over on Blue Sky said, this is a hair on fire situation. She wrote, the man whose rocket just exploded over South Florida in spectacular fashion, who had the FAA head removed because he dared to be concerned about Elon Musk's safety practices, who's a little too cozy with China, will now have unfettered access to confidential Treasury payment systems. What could possibly go wrong? Seth Masket, who is a political scientist at the University of Denver, said, if U.S. democracy is going to survive, it's going to require some decent people refusing to be bullied out of office by rich pricks outside the government and daring them to come get him. Trial attorney Max Kennerly says all the smart, savvy bankers and CEOs who think they're just getting deregulation with a side of racism do not understand that they will also be taken for a ride as Musk and Trump treat the entire federal government like a mob protection racket, freely skimming anywhere they like. And that's the big concern. If Musk has access to this system, he could see every single penny that goes to any of his competitors, his SpaceX competitors, any automakers that might compete with Tesla, satellite companies that might compete with Starlink, technology and biosciences companies that might compete with Neuralink. I mean, he could see it all. And, this is pretty amazing. I mean, this is also over at the Washington Post. This is what they wrote. Run by the Bureau of the Fiscal Service. These sensitive systems. Now, these are the systems that Musk wants access to. Musk, who has never elected anything. The sensitive, and who was not approved by the Senate. The sensitive systems control the flow of more than $6 trillion annually to households, businesses, and more nationwide. Tens, if not hundreds of millions of people across the country rely on these systems, which are responsible for distributing Social Security and Medicare benefits, salaries for federal personnel, payments to government contractors and grant recipients, tax refunds, among tens of thousands of other functions. And Elon Musk wants to be on the inside. He wants to know what's going on, who's getting the money, how much are they getting, when are they getting it. Yeah. Why? Nobody knows for sure, apparently. I mean, in theory, I suppose this is all, he's looking for inefficiency. But how do you find inefficiency? By looking at who got, what checks were written. This just makes no sense. So what's on your mind today? It's Anything Goes weekend here. Andy in Roseville, Minnesota. Hey, Andy, what's up? Thanks for listening to SiriusXM.
Yeah. Hey, Tom. Thanks for holding space to take my call. So I wanted to add to your segment yesterday when you talked about messaging points. I think you had 7 or 8 of them. Mm-hmm. I wanted to add another one to that, and that's called the opposition or Democrats need to have their own Pavlov's dog. Now, Pavlov's dog, of course, is Pavlov's a psychologist who used a bell to ring the bell to get the dog to be conditioned to have dinner. It's time for dinner, salivation, and so forth. Right. So where I'm getting and why I'm saying this, let's start with the ad that Donald Trump had right before the election. Kamala Harris is for they and them, which were, of course, transgender prisoners, and Donald Trump was for you. And how did that become so effective? And of course, Republicans are always going off pronouns and how terrible they are. But Donald Trump used a pronoun himself. And the Pavlov's dog example that I'm going to use is the word they or they are. In the debates that he had with Kamala Harris, Donald Trump said the word they about 250 or so times.
Really?
I look further in a rant or a rally that he had in Erie, Pennsylvania. He said the word they 280 times.
Wow.
And then as yesterday, when I heard the press conference, with the little amount of words he said, there were a lot of theys in there. And the theys are, of course, with the DEI part.
Right.
That is Donald Trump's Pavlov dog, is the word they.
Yeah, this is the same thing Hitler did. When he referred to Jews, he always referred to them as part of a larger, international communist conspiracy. And it was always they, the conspirators, the international Jewish movement, the Zionists, the communists, the social. It was always a they. That's fascinating, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I did some digging because I'm concerned. I like to have pragmatic views. Like, am I a they? Because I might agree maybe with 20% of what they might be saying, but 80% I might think is nuts. But then I'm going to be classified as they and being dismissed. And I think the whole country is being dismissed by this rhetoric of this Pavlov's dog, like I'm saying. And I think the Democrats need to push back and have their own.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I think they do. It's just the word Trump. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Andy. That's fascinating. Thank you for that. Let me chew on that for a while. I appreciate the information. Devon in Pittsburgh. Hey, Devon, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Well, golly, wow. Okay, so going forward, here's what we need to do. I happened to see the DNC vice chair debate last night, and to my surprise, Malcolm Kenyatta, the Philadelphia gem, is running for vice chair, and I'd like to just put in a plug for him. And so going forward, we need a new plan. We need a new game, as you said. We need slogans, and we need to get rid of this delusion that focusing on Project 2025 is somehow going to save us or absolve us or free us from our chains. I mean, seriously, we just lost an election trying to get people to read a 2-inch thick diatribe full of details that I encourage you, if you're like me, I read it. If you're like me, read it. But it's not going to win us anything, folks.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's not just the Heritage Foundation either. The opponent in this game is Donald Trump. That's who we need to focus on. That's who we need to defeat. That's who we need to rally against. That's who we need to hold in our minds the slogan, resistance is fertile, and go forward into resisting this insanity.
Yeah.
Throw the book away, put it aside, put it in your bathroom for reading. But, folks, we got to focus on reality. And reality is what Donald Trump is doing every single day to offend, to abscond, to intimidate, to misdirect, to lead us down a road to the dissolution of our democracy. So let's make signs. Let's get on our feet. Let's get in the street, and let's stop this train.
I'm with you. Devon, thank you. That was a great rant. It's coming up on 15 minutes past the hour, and I'll continue picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the home of the political revolution. We'll be right back with your call. And welcome back. Chad in Wahpeton, North Dakota. Am I saying it right, Chad?
Wahpeton, but it's close. Yeah.
So what's up?
I'm kind of wondering why the American people, over 50% just sat out on those that are eligible to vote, and
pretty much always that way.
It's well documented by the numbers purely that voter suppression was off the charts. So there's no legitimate reason that even the ones that did vote or attempt to vote should ever consider this even a legitimate election. So why don't the American people? I mean, special elections are held all the time. Why a special election? I mean, can't be ordered at this particular point, even though Orange Boy I'm sitting on the throne right now.
Who's going to call that special election and under what authority, Chad?
Under the authority and everything else that there's the election wasn't even done properly. That there were two men that it was.
Except the Supreme Court has ruled that if you want to purge people from your voter rolls without telling them for pretty much any old reason you want, that's just fine. You know, all you have to do is follow a couple simple guidelines. And if you want to refuse to count people's ballots, all you need to do is throw them into the provisional ballot stack, and 40% of those never get counted. The Supreme Court has legalized, or at least 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court have legalized all this stuff. And, particularly in their decision gutting the Voting Rights Act, the Shelby County decision. So I don't see a legal basis, to do what you're suggesting, Chad. I get your sentiment. I'm horrified by the outcome of the election. I'd like to do something to change it, but unless you know something I don't. And it doesn't sound like you do.
Unfortunately, I don't know anything. I know that that there's no way on God's green earth any sane, rational human being would actually want misogyny, openly racist, and all the number of things. He's not even good at business.
Yeah.
I mean, so the thought that everything else that he's going to do anything good for the country is just ludicrous. And
well, he might by accident,
but
you never know. But yeah, no, I get it. And he's already, I mean, he and his billionaire buddies are trying to deconstruct the administrative state, which is fancy right-wing geek speak for destroy the American government and, weaken our country, weaken our resolve, tear Americans apart, destroy the American middle class, and, basically, soften us up for Putin. And then Putin will come in with his internet trolls, and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk will give them free reign on their various platforms.
BRICS.
So what?
We'll be a new part of the BRICS club.
I doubt it. I doubt it, especially after Trump threatened them over the weekend, or actually did before yesterday. Chad, I got to run, but I love your sentiment. I'm with you, brother. I just don't know how to do it. And thanks for watching us there in North Dakota. I appreciate it. We'll be right back. It's 19 and a half minutes past the hour. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them.
Live democracy, guiding us through the storm. In the heart of liberty, a brighter world is born. Voices of the people, rising strong and free. In the song of freedom, we find our destiny.
Welcome back. 20 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. Nancy in Woodland, California. Hey, Nancy, what's up? Nancy, watching Free Speech TV in Woodland, California. Going once, going twice.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear
Hey,
me?
Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Hi, sorry, I accidentally touched the mute button.
Oh, that happens.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to put the idea out there for people to think about doing a general strike. Just pick a day and everybody go on strike. Right now there seems to be, the billionaires need people to do the jobs that they have.
Right.
And if everybody goes on strike, that's going to hit them in the pocketbook, and they'll get an idea of how widespread the outrage is. I think we saw that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought, and I'll
I just saw, we saw that, a while back when Trump, I think it was opposed to federal funds, there was such outrage that he walked that back, at least for now. And then with the killing of the United Healthcare exec, which I don't condone at all, but we saw across the country, people are just outraged, about the healthcare coverage and too. So it just seems to me that there's really, I don't think Trump is as popular as he thinks he is.
No, he's nowhere near that, and he's got very low popularity.
And so it just seems to me that it would be a good idea for people to consider that. That might be a good, a good way of getting the attention of these people.
I get it. In France, they called a strike, and millions of people showed up in the streets all over the country. The difference between France and the United States is that about 80% of the French workforce is unionized, and the unions work together on things like this. Whereas in the United States, in the private sector, it's about 7% are unionized, and the federal unions are in the crosshairs of the Trump administration now. I think this is one of the reasons that they're trying to fire so many federal workers. And what they're going to start doing is, privatizing a whole bunch of other functions. They've already privatized about half the military, and more than half of Medicare. So we, outside of the media, outside of a couple of television networks, Free Speech TV, MSNBC, occasionally CNN, and progressive websites, there really isn't a central organizing arm that could launch a national boycott that would have Jews. But I get what you're saying, Nancy. I just I don't think it's going to happen. But what we can do is we can work with nonprofits like indivisible.org and others. We can get inside the Democratic Party and do everything we can there. We can talk on social media, to our friends and neighbors about, our opinions. We can be outspoken. You can do like Norma from Montgomery, Alabama does, her walk and talk. She carries in her purse, she carries, literature about how horrible the Republicans are, printouts of articles and things, and shares them with people. I mean, there's a lot we can do short of a strike, but I understand what you're saying, and I share your sentiment. I just don't see how we haven't had a successful nationwide strike in the United States, frankly, since the 50s, maybe the 60s. So it would just be a real challenge. But I'm with you, Nancy. I got to move on. But thank you for the call. 24 minutes past the hour. Dwayne in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Dwayne, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Fine, thank you. What's up?
A couple things. My son, he graduated down in Florida out of school, and he's going to be a pilot. So he's in his third phase right now, and he was going to minor in air traffic controller.
Who's
this? He
this?
get his minor. My son.
Oh, your son. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, and he was going to get a minor air traffic controller after he got a minor in business. I said, "Why'd you do that?" He goes, "Dad, you know how hard it is, the stress what these people go through." So we're talking about yesterday. I go, "What do you think about what happened, with Trump?" He goes, "It's a bunch of BS." He goes, "The air traffic controllers in New York, Washington are the best in the world."
Yeah, they have to be to get those jobs.
Yes, and he goes, "I fly Orlando executives, and they're mostly all women." He said, "They're phenomenal." And I go, "Why do you think he said this?" He goes, "One word, privatization. He wants to privatize air traffic controller." He goes, "Remember a couple of years ago?" He goes, "Remember a couple of years ago, around 4 years ago, I wrote that paper?" I go, "No, I don't." He goes, "I'll send it to you." He said he was totally against it. He goes, "You think if they privatize it, don't ever get in the plane."
This is in this is in Project 2025, I believe. I know privatizing the TSA is in Project 2025. I think that privatizing the air traffic system, the ATC system, is also. I double check that. I may be wrong, but that's my recollection.
Yeah, and that's what he talked about, privatization. And he said, "Dad, don't ever get in an airplane." He just explained how planes land and all that. Explained everything about how everything works in the air traffic controller. He goes, the safety. He goes, it will be really bad. A lot of people would die if they privatized the airlines.
Yeah, that had not occurred to me, but it makes so much sense, Dwayne. This was a big thing that started under Reagan, was privatize basically everything. I mean, the federal government, like, Bernie points out that the people who work in the Smithsonian, who are behind the counter where they sell knickknacks and memorabilia and stuff. They're all working for a contractor who's paying them like $10 an hour, and the contractor's being reimbursed at like $20 an hour. I mean, it's the privatization almost never produces savings. Usually what it does is it produces a whole big windfall for some corporation that's good friends with the Republicans who did the privatization, and they kick back, campaign finance funds to them, and that's the whole point of it. Is it's just another way to extract money from our federal government. But Dwayne, thank you for that. Let me ponder that. That would make a great op-ed. Dwayne, thank you very much for the call, and give your son a tip of the hat from me, from another pilot, from another licensed pilot. Thanks a lot, Dwayne. Appreciate the call. 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
down, locked out, why prison doesn't work, and how we can do better, by Maya Chenwar, who is, or was, I believe she still is, the publisher, or the editor, rather, over at truthout.org. This is from the introduction, the very beginning of the book. She uses a word I can't say on the air. I'll replace it with the word damn. Damn, 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 damn. I'm crying with my mother over the phone. It's late evening, December 25th, 2012, and Kayla, my only sister and best friend, has been arrested for the 7th time in the past 6 years. She's in jail again, and this time we're sort of hoping she'll stay there. If she asks, I tell Mom, I'm not bailing her out. Well, you know, we're not, Mom says, her voice low and far away, a weary echo of words uttered in months and years past. If she's in there, at least she'll be safe. Jail, we agree, may be the only place that can save Kayla's life, staving off her burning dependency on heroin. Neither of us acknowledges that regardless of whether Kayla stays clean while incarcerated, sooner or later she'll be getting out. Do we know what she's in for, I asked Mom. Does it matter? I think of Kayla cuffed and listless, being dragged through the doors of the Cook County Jail, catching the eyes of women she's known before in court, on the street, in juvenile detention, in jail, in prison. I wonder whether a part of her is relieved to be back. Later, when I pick up the phone and hear a robotic voice announce, you have a collect call from the Cook County Jail, press 5 to take the call, I press the hang-up button and get into bed. My attitude toward Kayla's incarceration was born out of desperation. She'd overdosed 3 times within 2 months, passing out on the street, awakening in abandoned buildings or crowded hospitals, her pulse barely ticking. Yet my wish chafed against not only my love for her, but also my politics, my ideals, my sense of justice and truth. After all, I run a social justice-based news organization and have denounced the colossus that is the prison industrial complex for as long as I can remember. For nearly a decade, I've corresponded with a number of people in prison as both interviewees and pen pals, and I've learned much from them about the violence and hopelessness of our system. My understandings of the power structures that create prisons have been guided by the work of people like activist and scholar Angela Davis, a staunch prison abolitionist. How could I reconcile my wholehearted opposition to the prison industrial complex with a desire to see my own sister locked up? When I look back on that time, I can only comprehend it by acknowledging the insidious, persistent role that prison occupied in my mind. It was closely connected to the role it occupies in larger society. Incarceration serves as the default answer to many of the worst social problems plaguing this country. Not because it solves them, but because it buries them. By isolating and disappearing millions of Americans, more than 2.3 million right now, making us the most incarcerated country on the planet, prison conveniently disappears deeply rooted issues that society, or rather those with power in society, would rather not attend to. Prison, writes Angela Davis, performs a feat of magic. As massive numbers of homeless, hungry, unemployed, drug-addicted, illiterate, and mentally ill people vanish behind its walls, the social problems of extreme poverty, homelessness, hunger, unemployment, drug addiction, illiteracy, and mental illness become more ignorable, too. But, as Davis notes, prisons do not disappear problems, they disappear human beings. And the caging and erasure of those human beings, mostly people of color and poor people, perpetuates a cycle in which large groups of people are cut off from mainstream society and denied the freedoms, opportunities, civil dignity, and basic needs that allow them a good life. In many jails and prisons, incarcerated people are tossed into a dank, dungeon-like solitary confinement cell when they are determined to have misbehaved. It's dubbed the hole. Isolated and dark, it shuts out almost all communication with fellow prisoners in the outside. Guards control the terms of confinement and the channels, if any, by which words can travel in and out. The whole presents a stark symbol of the institution of prison in its entirety, which functions on the tenets of disappearance, isolationism, and disposability. The solution to our social problems, the mechanism that's supposed to keep things together, amounts to destruction, the disposal of vast numbers of human beings, the breaking down of families, and the shattering of communities. Prison is tearing society apart. This country's most marginalized communities bear the overwhelming brunt of that devastation, but ultimately we are all caught up in the destruction as the politics of isolation ruptures the human bonds that could otherwise hold together a safer, healthier, and more just society. The behemoth that encompasses the prison is called by many names. The most meaningful ones, I think, are those that convey the pervasiveness of its power, the way it infects the world outside as well as the people within. Scholar and activist Beth Ritchie uses the term prison nation, describing it as, quote, a broad notion of using the arm of the law to control people, especially people who are disadvantaged and come from disadvantaged communities, end quote. That control can take the form of prisons, jails, surveillance, policing, detention, probation, harsh restrictions on child guardianship, the militarization of schools, and other strategies of isolation and disposal, particularly deployed against poor communities of color, especially black communities. Others have used prison nations simply to demonstrate the system's vastness, how it infiltrates our culture and fuels our national politics, often in invisible ways. Prison industrial complex, PIC, is another key term. Rachel Herzing of the prison abolitionist group Critical Resistance defines it, and then she goes on through this. It's an extraordinary book, Locked Down, Locked Out by Maya Shen.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government and military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
GOP are stirring the flames, flooding the zone with their lies and games. They peddle the hate, turn neighbor on kin, breaking America from the inside within.
35 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. John in Los Angeles. Hey, John, what's up?
How you doing, Tom? Long-time listener. I remember your gems of wisdom on Air America probably 20 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, well, thank you, John.
I don't want to switch gears, but I'd like you to address the nuts and bolts of Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court and how the wording of the decision can be changed to benefit us rather than, I think the question is particularly have a probe because of Trump's having been awash in $250 million of Elon Musk's money. And if you could just comment on that, and maybe if you have time, I don't want to cast a too far-reaching net, but if you can address Tulsi Gabbard's prospective stint for Director of National Intelligence, and I'll take your answer off the air. I appreciate that.
Sure. Tulsi Gabbard, in my opinion, is a threat to national security. She's a member of a bizarre cult. She has taken positions in the past that seem to be, aligned with Vladimir Putin and other right-wing dictators, Bashar al-Assad, et cetera. I think that probably Trump nominated her for that position. Possibly Trump nominated her for that position because Putin told him to. That would be my take on her. With regard to Citizens United, I wrote a book about this, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. And, this really started, arguably it started in 1886 with the Southern Pacific Railroad case, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad, in which the head note of that case, which has no legal authority, was written by John Chandler Bancroft Davis, who was the a former railroad head. He was the son of the governor of Massachusetts, a very wealthy man. He was the clerk of the court. And he said that the Chief Justice, Morrison Remick Waite, had claimed that corporations were persons and therefore entitled to protections under the 14th Amendment, which had just been passed 20 years earlier. And it was a lie. The decision itself actually says the exact opposite. But then the Supreme Court started quoting that lie, and that was the beginning of corporate personhood in a big way. I mean, the literal beginning was probably the 1915 Dartmouth decision by the Supreme Court. That was a foreign corporation, but the Supreme Court recognized it as a person. But that was for purposes of taxation and contract law and owning property. But the 14th Amendment provision, that came about in 1886. And then, flash forward to 1976, and the Supreme Court had this case, Buckley versus Vallejo, that was brought by, I believe, by James Buckley, the brother of William F. Buckley, if my recollection is correct. And he was arguing that he, as a rich guy, should be able to give more money to individual political campaigns. And at that time, we had some very, very strong campaign laws, many of which dated back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. The Tillman Act, for example, was passed in 1906, and it outlawed any contributions by corporations to any candidate for federal office. So we had, and then there was just dozens of laws that were passed in the 70s in the wake of the Nixon and Agnew bribery scandals. So that decision overturned, a couple of dozen laws. 2 years later, Lewis Powell himself of the Powell Memo authored a decision called First National Bank versus Frank Bellotti. Frank Bellotti was the Attorney General of Massachusetts, and he had sued the First National Bank for putting money into an anti-abortion campaign when abortion had nothing to do with banking. Because the law in Massachusetts at the time said corporations could only participate in politics if it affected their business. The Supreme Court, it was a 5-4 decision. All five were Republican appointees. And they ruled in that case that because corporations are persons, they have access to the First Amendment. And 2 years later, the Supreme Court had ruled that money is actually the same thing as speech, and because it is the same thing as speech, it is protected by the Free Speech Clause of the First Amendment. So now you've got both rich guys and corporations protected by the First Amendment. And then in 2010, in Citizens United versus FEC, you had a case where they just took it, they said, okay, this is the law. Money is the same thing as speech. It's protected by the First Amendment. Corporations are the same thing as you and me. They're protected by the First Amendment. Therefore, we're going to blow the doors out. And they knocked down all kinds of, hundreds of good government laws, time frames within which you could or couldn't do things, maximum amounts of donations, all kinds of stuff. The main thing from the Buckley decision, actually, now that I think about it, Jim Buckley was running for Congress, and it was that rich people could finance their own campaigns on an unlimited basis. That was the main part of the Buckley decision in '76. But in Citizens United, they basically extended that logic to everybody and to judges as well. So, and this, of course, happened. Clarence Thomas was the deciding vote on this, and he'd been on the take from a couple of billionaires, most notably Harlan Crow, for several years. So bribing judges, federal judges, and bribing politicians became legal. And then in 2013, in the McCutcheon decision, they even doubled down on that. So that's how we got here, John. And the only way that I can think of to undo this is for Congress, which has the power to overrule the Supreme Court, Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, for Congress to pass a law basically overturning Citizens United. And that is not going to happen during a Republican administration. Have I missed anything? Did you have something specifically in mind you were expecting me to say?
No, that's it. You answered my question more than adequately. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot, John. Good to hear from you. David, in Woodland Hills, what's on your mind today?
Last Friday, a lady called and asked you, what is their end game? If you will grant me a minute here, I will attempt to explain the end game.
Go for it.
May I? A few years ago, Tom, I proposed a theory to you that the poor and the middle class have already fought and lost World War III, and most didn't even know they were in it. It's an oligarch and fascist coup, started when Bush stole the 2000 election. Since then, Tom, they control everything, worldwide, the money, media, militaries, the politicians, the police, the judges, the very law itself. They control education, and by voter suppression, they control elections. I suggested back then, Tom, that global warming and now economic terrorism, too, global warming would be among their major weapons, a weapon they profit from and can always escape themselves. They have mansions, villas, beach houses, underground bunkers, private yachts, and jets to get them there. In addition, Tom, those who chant Jews will not replace us were also chanting Russia is our friend.
Right.
Because as white supremacists, they are natural allies. So at first, Trump will ally with Russia. He'll allow China to take all of Asia. Putin gets Europe. Trump gets the Americas. Later on, they'll fight themselves. Tom, the main goal is to eliminate 3 to 5 billion people because the global warming world they created and profit from cannot sustain that many people, and they know it. From their point of view, 1 to 3 billion people is enough. Tom, finally, this is patriarchy, white male supremacy, refusing to give up a single inch of the power they have exploited since slavery. They have turned the earth against their enemies.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that, David, and I think it's a pretty damn good analysis. And in using global warming against us, they are following the script that Naomi Klein laid out in her book Shock Doctrine. I mean, it's just this is not new. It's not rocket science, but you summarized it very well, David. Thank you very much for that. It's coming up on 15 minutes before the hour. I'll be right back with you in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the place where despair is not an option. I'll be right back with your calls here on Windows Weekend. Stay with us. And welcome back. Mary in Mill Creek, Washington. Hey, Mary, what's up?
Hey, Tom, can you hear me?
I can.
All right. So I'm thinking about our DNC chair and how we move forward. I've decided there's some characteristics we need to look for. We need someone who's eloquent, who's brilliant, inspirational, insightful, respectful, qualified, thoughtful, and moral. When I saw those characteristics, there was a name that jumped out at me. I felt he meets every single one of those criteria. I would love to have him as our president. Unfortunately, the world we live in, or this country that we live in right now, I don't think he can win. But he can. His talents and gifts cannot be wasted. The person I'm recommending is Pete Buttigieg.
I love Pete Buttigieg, and I'd love to see him as head of the DNC or any other job he wants in government. I have a lot of respect for this guy, and I think he gets it. Although I was always a little concerned about his time at McKinsey. But it's not going to be him. It's either going to be Ken. What's Ken's last name? Martin. It's either going to be Ken Martin or Ben Wickler. I'm pretty sure. I think it's down to those two. Martin O'Malley's giving them a run for their money, but we'll see.
Why do we keep imploding? I mean, at this level of leadership, this position is as or more important than who runs for president.
Well, arguably, yeah, and I think Ken Martin or Ben Wickler, either one of them will do a great job. Frankly, I think Martin O'Malley would do a great job too, although he's a little more of a corporate Democrat. But those are the big three people. Pete Buttigieg is not even running, so there's not a chance that he's going to become the head of the DNC.
Well, we can look moving forward to create a movement, because I don't think the two leadership choices that we have right now, they may be.
I'll tell you where I think Pete is going to end up. Peters, what's his first name? Tom Peters? No. The senator from Michigan, Senator Peters, Gary Peters, thank you, just announced that he's not running for re-election, and that's in 2026. So in 2 years, you're going to have an open Senate seat in Michigan. And Pete Buttigieg and his husband Chastain and their 2 kids have been living in Michigan for quite some time. They moved out of Indiana, a decade ago, I think, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of buzz about Pete Buttigieg for that Senate seat. And he's a very ambitious guy, and getting into the Senate, and then from the Senate running for president like John Kerry did and many other people have done over the years. John Kennedy did. It seems like a logical path. The only thing I think that would prevent, I was going to say the only thing that would prevent him from running for the Senate would be if he ran for president, but the Senate race is in 26, the president race is in 28. So he may well be thinking if he can get that seat in the Senate in 26, do 2 years in the Senate, and then run for president, which is essentially what Jack Kennedy did. I think Jack Kennedy only served 4 years in the Senate.
Barack
I could be
Obama
wrong.
too.
Yeah, Barack Obama, 2 years in the Senate. You're absolutely right. Yeah, so it's a well-trod path to the White House, and Pete Buttigieg has on multiple occasions made his White House ambitions quite clear. So
I just feel like as Democrats, we've got to get our act together.
I'm with you, Mary. I'm with you. But taking a job as the head of the DNC is not a path to the White House. So I'm pretty sure Pete has no interest in that. Mary, thanks for the call. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
We turned our backs on what we need, chased the glitter, fed the greed. From Reagan's rise to Trump's parade, a billionaire kingdom we've remained. Free healthcare, it's just a dream, while yachts glide down a golden stream. We chose the few, forgot the rest, built this empire of excess. America chose wealth over well-being, blind to the pain its people are seeing. The homeless freeze, the hungry cry, while billionaires build towers in the sky. Oh, America, when will you see this gilded cage is not the land of the free?
Welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Lynn in Los Angeles. Hey, Lynn, what's up?
Hi. I don't know if I listened to the whole hearing, both hearings on RFK, sorry. Ooh, big mistake. RFK Jr. And I want to encourage any listeners who are in Rhode Island or who have friends in Rhode Island to call Senator Whitehouse, because I don't know if you heard the hearing, but Senator Whitehouse was the only senator who did not ask questions of RFK. He only said to him, "You're going to listen to me talk for 7 minutes." And all he did was talk about what he wanted for his state, funding for this program, that program. He went on and on like an angry curmudgeon, sort of, but he did not allow RFK to say a word. And I said, well, that's very strange. What's going on? Well, I know that they used to be college roommates and they're very, very close friends. So my worry is that if we don't call, or the callers of his state don't call him and urge him to vote no on that nomination, that Sheldon Whitehouse is going to vote yes. And since he's a Democrat, that gives any, on the fence Republicans a chance to say, well, if the Democrats don't like him, then I can say.
I didn't know they were roommates. What I read was that they were classmates.
Oh well,
I have not heard that they are close friends. I didn't see the testimony, so I can't speak to it, Lynn. But Sheldon Whitehouse is a good guy, and I would be astonished if he voted for RFK, for Bob Kennedy. I just would be astonished.
Do you think he would vote present? And if so, what would that do? I think he needs to vote no.
I think he needs to vote no too. But odds are, Trump is going to get all three of his nominees because he's just whipped these Republicans, into line, into shape. They're all terrified of him. They're just scared to death that he's gonna primary them. Lynn, I got to catch another call here, but finish your thought.
Well, you know how you say get involved. This is the chance to at least try to make a difference.
Sure,
calling
absolutely.
Or emailing.
Well, and
Thanks,
there's absolutely nothing wrong with calling all the members of the committee, and saying something. Thank you very much, Lynn. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I checked into. You said credit unions were better, and how Trump said that his first week in office mentioned the FDIC, and I thought, oh no, what is this about? So I went down to my bank, and I sat down and I said I want to withdraw my money, and I told him exactly why, that Trump is going after FDIC, and I'm not going to take a chance with my money. He's going to do an executive order and freeze accounts, whatever. Nothing doing. Dissolve the FDIC. I said it starts with the board he suggests, and the Senate okays it. And I said we know how that goes. That's a slam dunk. And I said I'm going down the road to a credit union. You know why? Because of Trump. He scares me, and that man is not well. And I says if I have to protect myself, I will. I withdrew my money, went down, my savings. I went down to the credit union, put it in there, and I tell you what, I've never had such good professional service in my life.
Oh, credit unions are wonderful.
They have people that they've been there a long time. And I had three clerks standing behind me as I was talking to the person at the desk in front of me, who was helping me withdraw my money. And they would say, oh, you don't have to worry, I said, we have to worry with that guy.
Yeah.
And so if anything you can do that you can apply to Trump, do it. You're going to...
Go. And a lot of credit unions, I think most, maybe not all, but I think most credit unions are basically run, when you put money in, you become a member and you get to vote on their officers and things. They're basically run like co-ops. And
they even suggested me checking that website and all of that. So it was just unbelievable. So don't be afraid if you're going to show them. Your money's just moving. You're not losing anything.
Sure.
So
especially if you're with one of the big five banks. I think there's incredible risk there. But again, don't take investment advice from me. Diane, I got to move. But thank you for the call. Rick in Milton, Delaware. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Well, let's just say I might be wearing a pink triangle sooner than later. Accordingly to my husband this week, the Idaho legislature has submitted to the Supreme Court to revisit marriage equality.
Yep.
And as you know...
Per the request of Clarence Thomas.
Yes. And some of them have expressed interest about taking it away.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they would take my marriage away. It doesn't insult anybody. It doesn't do anything other than for me and my husband. I don't understand the cruelty of it.
It's because they're bigots.
I have 7 brothers. They're all married to women, and some have been divorced 2, 3, 4 times. And I, as a gay man, married my husband, and I've only been married once.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
and
no, I have a queer member, a gay member of my family who's married, and who adopted a couple of kids, and is terrified or is very concerned, shall we say? And I totally get it. I'm blithering here. I'm very concerned, Rick. I am very concerned for our gay brothers and sisters and trans brothers and sisters. Rick, thank you for the call. Good. I wish you well and good luck. Wow. We're hitting the top of the hour here. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment and more of the news of the day. Is using AI facial recognition to deport anti-Netanyahu protesters coming next? Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Richard Wolff's Understanding Socialism. This is from the introduction. Socialism is a kind of yearning for a better life than what capitalism permits for most people. Socialist yearnings are as old as capitalism itself because they are its products. Where and when capitalism's problems and failings have accumulated criticism and critics, socialist voices have arisen. And so it is again now. Any serious discussion of socialism must begin by acknowledging socialism's rich diversity. Whatever particular aspect of socialism we choose to analyze, they need to be located within socialism's complexity. That avoids presenting one's own interpretation as if it were the entirety of socialism. In this book, I focus on the economic aspects of socialism, how it differs from capitalism in broad outlines. I'm more interested in socialist critiques of capitalism and their implications about socialist alternatives than in the particulars of the few early experiments in erecting socialist systems, USSR, People's Republic of China, and so on, that history so far offers. Finally, my own education and work constrain me to concentrate on Western Europe and North America. Some important aspects of socialism are thus not covered or discussed here. Yearnings for better lives, such as socialism proposes, are not new. In slave societies, the slaves hoped and dreamed of lives less hard and less out of their own control. Their yearning aimed to obtain freedom. They sought social change that would preclude any one person being the property of another. In feudal societies, the serfs, free in the sense that no one owned them, yearned for better lives too. Their subordination to lords included heavy labor and other burdens that they wanted lifted. They hoped and dreamed of a society in which they would not be bound to the land, the lord of that land, and the feudal dues of labor and subservience. The serfs mobilized in the 1789 French Revolution to demand liberty, equality, and brotherhood. In effect, the serfs had expanded on what the slaves had called freedom. In the American Revolution against British King George III, the revolutionaries were neither slaves nor serfs. They were mostly self-employed farmers, craftspeople, and merchants subject to a foreign feudal kingdom. They wanted liberty as individuals to pursue their dreams without hindrance from feudalism or monarchism, whether foreign or domestic. They added democracy to the goals advanced by the slaves and serfs before them. The different systems of slavery, feudalism, and small-scale self-employment produced masses of people yearning for better lives. Eventually, each of those systems provoked revolutions. Many people then sought to break away from and go beyond those systems. The French and American revolutions marked key moments in the social transformations of major pre-capitalist systems into capitalist ones. By capitalist system, we mean that particular organization of production in which the basic human relation is employer-employee, instead of master-slave, lord-serf, or individual self-employment. The revolutionaries who wanted and built capitalism hoped and believed the transition to employer-employee relations of production would bring with them the liberty, equality, brotherhood, and democracy they had yearned for. The revolution's leaders promised to themselves and to the people they led that those goals would be achieved. But the transition to capitalist employer-employee relations that increasingly replaced the previous slave, feudal, and self-employment relations of production had unintended consequences. Capitalism soon proved to be different from what its revolutionaries had hoped. While it enabled some people to be more free and more independent than slaves, serf, or self-employed subjects of monarchies had been, it also seriously limited freedom, independence, and democracy for many. Capitalism betrayed many of the promises made by its advocates. It produced and reproduced great inequalities of income and wealth. Poverty proved to be as endemic as capitalism seemed equally adept at producing and reproducing both wealth and poverty. The capitalist rich used their wealth to shape and control politics and culture. Democratic forms hid very undemocratic content. The cyclical instability attending capitalism constantly threatened and hurt large numbers of people, and so on. Growing numbers of employees within capitalism began to yearn for better lives. They defined those yearnings first in the familiar terms of the earlier French and American revolutions: equality, fraternity, liberty, and democracy. They criticized a capitalism that failed to deliver those to most people and demanded social changes to achieve them. Many people still continue to want a better, softer, friendlier capitalism, where government regulates and intervenes to achieve more of what the French and American revolutionaries had yearned for and promised. They are also often self-defined as socialists. However, capitalism's development provoked another, different perspective that also called itself socialism. In that view, capitalism had not broken from slavery, feudalism, and monarchy nearly as much as its advocates had imagined. Slavery had master slaves, feudalism had lord serfs, and monarchy had king subjects as their key sources of their inequalities, lack of freedom, oppressions, and conflicts. The employer-employee relation of production and capitalism generated parallel problems. Capitalism installed monarchies inside individual workplaces, even as monarchies outside workplaces were rejected. Kings mostly disappeared, but inside workplaces, the owners or their designated boards of directors assumed king-like powers. The book Understanding Socialism by Richard Wolff.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program, Operation Wrath of Zion. Have you heard of this? This is amazing. Donald Trump signed an executive order to cancel the visas of college students who have protested against Netanyahu or in support of Palestine, which opens the door to their being deported. And this small company, Stellar Defense and Cyber Intelligence, is ready to help. They've got this AI technology. Stellar is the maker of something called Nesher AI. Nesher is Hebrew for eagle. Their slogan on social media is, "The eagle listens, the eagle watches, the eagle knows." And this company is saying that now that Donald Trump has signed this executive order, that they're prepared to use their AI product to identify anti-Netanyahu protesters, college protesters in the United States, so that they can have their student visas revoked so that they can be put on a plane and deported out of the country. There's a conservative right-wing group, it's called Betar, that apparently is using this product. This article, it's in the dropsitenews.com by Jack Polson, and the article is a little bit ambiguous about the connection between Betar and this company. But he writes, Betar is a self-described right-wing Zionist youth movement that has made prominent use of the facial recognition tool, so they're using this product. Together, they hope to feed the names of pro-Palestinian protesters to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and other law enforcement agencies, according to statements made by both groups. In December, the Times of Israel reported that Betar had worked with pro-Israel U.S. lawmakers, including Senators Ted Cruz and John Fetterman, on plans to round up, quote, suspects in anticipation of Donald Trump's return to the White House. Whoa. Operation Wrath of Zion. This stuff is getting serious. I would also argue that this stuff is getting to violations of the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects all persons in the United States, not just U.S. citizens. I have seen multiple postings recently where people are saying, oh, well, non-citizens don't have constitutional rights, don't have constitutional. That's not true. The Constitution, nowhere in the Constitution does it say only citizens have these rights. It says persons. People within the United States have these rights, the rights guaranteed under the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments to the Constitution, among others. Meanwhile, Chris Coons, the Democratic senator from Delaware, talking to a reporter with Raw Story, Sarah Burris, said that one of the most disturbing answers that Kash Patel gave yesterday was when he was asked who the FBI works for. And apparently his response was something to the order of he works for Donald Trump, or the FBI works for Donald Trump. The correct answer, and by the way, Chris Coons says, I asked everybody this question. He says, Bill Barr answered it easily. See, the correct answer is the FBI works for the American people. Bill Barr answered it easily. Pam Bondi answered it easily. Merrick Garland answered it easily. I do that with every nominee, says Chris Coons. But Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard, both of them refused to answer the question. Coons said, you have to be willing to refuse an order and resign. And then he says, Patel just wouldn't. He wouldn't say that. He wouldn't go there. So apparently Donald Trump has made it very clear to Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard and pretty much everybody else, all of his, Pete Hegseth and Pam Bondi, his nominees, that if they do not put their loyalty to him ahead of their loyalty to the Constitution, they will be out on their butts, which of course is what happened in his last White House stint. Only this time he's got, now an entire enforcement mechanism working for him. And, shortly, if Bondi is approved by the Senate, and I'm guessing that will probably happen next week, he's going to have the entire, the FBI and the entire police apparatus of the United States on his side. It's going to get very, very intense, I think, very soon. So what say you? Tashara in Cleveland, Ohio. Hey, Tashara, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. How are you doing? So I'm sure you have addressed this before, but what are your thoughts about boycotting or leaving X in masses due to Elon's involvement in just tearing down and apart our democracy, his blatant racism, his ties to the Nazis, his disregard to human life, and even the working class, and then even throwing in some of these other social media outlets to that matter. I know that, these outlets kind of connect us to the world and what's going on, but using them is just like condoning and just providing a pass to, these bad people. Yeah. And then my next question is, do you think the only reason why Trump is trying to reduce the federal workforce is just to free up capital so Elon and other companies can just get more rich through government contracts? Or tax breaks. Yeah, I think so. I think that they're trying to kill off the government in order to fund tax breaks for billionaires. And they've pretty much said that. Yeah, with regard to getting off X, I still post on X, but I only post my daily take because the algorithm, is so against liberals that there's almost no point in posting on X anymore.
but I don't want to. But I post on X, I post on Tribal, I post on LinkedIn, I post on Threads, I post on Blue Sky. I'm sure I'm missing one. Spoutable, I post on Spoutable. Oh, and Mastodon. That's every morning I post on all those sites. I don't want somebody to steal my name on X, frankly. So I'm kind of squatting on it. So I would not, cancel my account, but I no longer interact with people on X. If somebody sends me a message or responds to something I post, I by and large ignore it. If I am going to respond to somebody, I do it over on Blue Sky because I want to, help build that social media network as an alternative. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, and then really quickly, I just want to say that I do get your Hartmann reports, and I enjoy reading them. In the one January 30, the IF report, I really enjoyed reading that. So thank you for all that you do, your insight.
Thank you very much. Good talking to you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
John in Middleton, Wisconsin. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Good afternoon, Tom. I wanted to talk about money, specifically modern monetary theory. Have you run across that?
Oh, yeah. What's her name? The woman who started this whole thing.
Stephanie Kelton.
Stephanie Kelton, yes. She's been on this program many times. It hasn't been on for a year or so, but she used to come on fairly regularly. I'm familiar with modern monetary theory. I've read her book. I've read other books on it. We've had several other MMT, aligned economists on the program fairly regularly. So, yeah. What's your question?
Well, that's great. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch her 90-minute documentary, Finding the Money.
Yeah.
That's a good show. The thing I'm saying is that people should have a lot better understanding of how things work rather than the BS that we are normally fed by the government, that their federal government doesn't have any money.
Yeah. I thought one of the most interesting things that she points out, her $1 trillion coin thing is actually starting to be taken seriously by some Democratic members of the House and Senate. But the most interesting thing to me was her reframing the national debt as an opportunity for the public to store money in a safe space that produces interest, which is exactly what it is. It's why when Andrew Jackson paid the national debt down to zero, it's only happened once in the history of the United States. It produced a really, really deep recession, or depression, actually, the worst we've had in history. It was worse than the Great Depression. And the reason why was because there was no safe place for corporations and rich people to put their money, and or even foreign governments, for that matter. And what she was pointing out is that every time we get the national debt down, we get a recession. And I thought that was fascinating. I saw a graph that she had produced a couple days ago that showed basically, the national debt or the annual deficit actually versus recessions, and I thought just the whole thing fascinates me. I don't pretend to be an economist, but I get it. John, thanks for the call. It's almost 16 minutes past the hour. We'll be in a few seconds. We'll be right back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stay tuned.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where we dare to say, is Walmart a person? Dare to ask, and we dare to say, no. The Supreme Court got that one really, really wrong. And welcome back. Michael in Lake Bay, Washington. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. You may or may not remember that I'm an 83-year-old folk singer, contemporary of Bob Dylan and Joan Baez, and I came through the anti-Vietnam War and the Equal Rights Amendment fights, and in Chicago, and so I'm kind of a veteran about this stuff. Never, of course, have we ever seen anything like what's going on right now, where an autocrat would actually take over all the phases of government, and I'm gonna introduce the elephant in the room, Tom. I think I will say it this way. I would not be a bit surprised if a little further down the road, the wrong person, the wrong Democrat or lefty or anti-Trump person gets screwed just enough that they go get their gun and somebody gets shot.
Well, you had two Trump supporters who tried to shoot him so far, Michael.
Right, exactly. But I mean somebody that's got a little better aim. Yeah.
Let's hope not. I don't want this guy made a martyr.
And the last few words are, and it throws us into civil war.
Yeah.
And
I don't see the civil war happening, but and I guarantee you this: the security around Trump is insane. I mean, it's just there. I mean, he's had two attempts on his life. No matter what we think of him, we don't want to condone that. But I get your point, Michael. I get your point.
And it might not be Trump, but I think about how the First World War started. You know, it was so relatively insignificant that this.
Well, when Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo, there was a huge tension already existing between Serbia and Yugoslavia. I mean, that area was right on the edge of out and out conflict, and that was just the spark that lit the fuse or set off the bomb. I don't think that I hope we're not at that point, Michael.
Well, I certainly hope so too. But I live up here in the woods, Tom, with a lot of people that are hunters and have some interesting ideas about it. And I also, the fact it reminds me of when Carter started introducing the global warming idea and how to combat against that, and it was such a big thing that most people seemingly most people couldn't grasp the idea that the whole planet was warming up. And it took it's taken this long for people to actually be able to have a consciousness about that. Right. And I think, people are just kind of going like, well, it's going to be all right. And people are talking about who's going to head up the DNC and who's going to do this. And we're going to, in the next election. And I'm not so sure we'll have a next election, Tom. I'm real scared, and I've been through enough to back that up. I think
I totally get it, Michael, and I truly hope we are not, the band playing on the Titanic. I don't think we are, but you never know. Michael, thank you for your call. 20 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with you. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew both took cash bribes while they were in the White House. Since then, the Supreme Court, or at least 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, made it a lot easier for politicians to take bribes with their Citizens United decision, which basically legalized political bribery as long as it's done through campaigns or PACs or super PACs. But for some people, there's just never enough money, right? Donald Trump has been running small-time hustles to make money for decades, selling sneakers, Bibles, steaks, vodka, water. But now he's hit the big time. He's got these fungible tokens, right? These fungible crypto assets, which are basically just digital pictures of Donald Trump that say, fight, fight, fight. And he has turned them into an $8 billion machine. His wife is in on this, too, with his Trump coin. It's a new way that foreign powers and billionaires in the United States can just shovel money into Donald Trump's pocket. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled Presidential Payola, The Evolution of Political Bribery. Check it out. 22 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here on our weekend program. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Oh, I just want to let everybody know I'm not getting all bent out of shape over Donald Trump being president right now. I mean, I spent 8 years trying to stop that clown, that lying, felon, corrupt, criminal traitor from getting back into the White House, and the billionaires put him back in there anyway. So for the next 2 years, I'm cool. I am good. I'm not going to be posting on Yahoo anymore. I'm letting them have that space because it's not going to do any good to do that in the next 2 years. I can't affect anything from this point forward. The liar is back in the White House. The criminal is back in the White House. So I'm getting rid of some of my anxiety. I'm not fighting Donald Trump anymore. I'm just going to take care of my life, and I got my popcorn, and I am ready to enjoy the clown show.
Okay,
it's back.
Larry. I'm all in favor of taking a break occasionally, and like Louise's song, go out in the woods. But I do think that our breaks should not be a 2-year-long period. It's just my take on this. But I get it. I get it. Everybody's got to deal with it in their own way. So I'm curious your thoughts on the latest Fed activity, Larry, given that that's your bailiwick typically.
The Fed is pure fascist right now. They've sort of boxed themselves into a corner with this big lie that claimed that inflation was sticky. Inflation was not sticky. It dropped from 9% down to 3%.
Right. Wasn't it 2.4% at the Valley?
Pardon?
It was 2.4% about 4 months ago, wasn't it? Wasn't that the bottom?
Yeah, it got low.
Yeah.
So that's not sticky. That's a blatant bald-faced lie by Powell. What our fascist media did is they ran with that because that would get rid of Biden. So they kept talking about sticky inflation when it was Powell's Fed rates that were sticky. They stuck at 5.5% all the way till September.
Oh, it's sticky high
it
interest rates.
It was very sticky.
Yeah.
So they fed us this.
But they just refused to lower them after Trump demanded it. I mean, that's a good sign, isn't it? A little bit of independence.
It's not. It's one of those situations where when you keep the Fed rate at a high level, the economy kind of adjusts to that, and it starts feeding upon itself, and people start going out and buying these long-term CDs. They start putting their money in bonds. At that point, the Fed is almost losing control over the bond levels, which is why they're beginning to rise up to the levels where they were when Powell destroyed 4 banks in California and New York, and then transferred all that money over to North Carolina. Gee, that was good for the Republicans, wasn't it? And then Elon Musk, another fascist, just moved after he made all this money in California, he moved his company to Texas, and then Elon Musk actually made more money under Joe Biden than he did with Donald Trump, if you go check it out. He only made about $150 billion under Donald Trump. He made over $2 billion, $2 trillion, $1.5 trillion. Let me get this right. He made roughly $150 billion under Donald Trump. He made $200 billion under Joe Biden.
Makes sense.
And a lot of people won't realize that. But this is the thing about Republicans, and this is the thing about rich people. They're as stupid as they can be. Every time a Democratic president is in the White House, the rich people make more money. And then they rush out and they fund these incompetent, these fascist Republicans
who give them tax breaks
so they can lose money.
No, the rich people love recessions, Larry. And your point is well taken that every Republican president, since Nixon has given us a recession, and only one Democratic president has. But
rich people only love recessions.
But the recessions are buying opportunities for
years.
Yeah, they want it to only last a short while.
That's only the last 15 years. If you actually go back and look at who loses money, the stock market goes down when we have recessions. Rich people own the bulk of the stock market. They lose money when we have recessions.
But no, they don't. They hang on to their money and they ride it back up when it goes back up. The people who lose money are the people with 401ks who during the recession lose their jobs and they have to liquidate their assets at a loss so that they can be picked up by the rich people. I mean, this is J. Paul Getty and Joe Kennedy perfected this in 1930.
I've looked at this, Tom. What I'm telling you is that the rich people lose the most money during the recession. Until we got fascism under George Bush and Donald Trump. That's when they started pouring in the trillions of dollars to make
now it's working for them. Okay, Larry.
Now it's working.
Larry, I got to run. Thanks a lot for the call. Always good to hear from you. It's 27 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is the place where smart people get their news. We'll be right back with your calls on Anything Goes Weekend. Stay tuned.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that. Though, because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting progressive talk radio, and tag you're it. When I was a little kid, my grandmother had a piano and I loved to play it. I was incompetent, but I was figuring out all kinds of stuff. And then I kind of got away from it and, went to school and things got busy and just lost track of it. Well, now there's this fascinating new study out of the University of Geneva, Switzerland, that is making me think maybe I should go back and learn the piano. What they found was that they took a group of 132 healthy older adults, retired, 62 to 78 years old. Half of them learned the piano, half of them took music classes without learning the piano. And what they found was that those who learned the piano actually had the strongest increase in their memory, in their mental competence, their mental faculties. Those who took the music classes also did well, but learning the piano was a huge step. So check it out. There's a whole long rant about this over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out.
There's a shadow on the nation, a chill in the air. A leader rises claiming he'll repair. But the cracks in the foundation, they're part of his plan to dismantle the democracy we built by hand. He calls oppressed the enemy, rewrites the truth, turns allies into traitors, empowers the uncouth. Courts packed with loyalists, the rule of law bends. Will we watch in silence as our freedom ends? Do not obey in advance, don't fall in line. When the strong man calls, remember the signs. Question the orders, resist the dance. Save democracy, do not obey in advance.
Welcome back, 36 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here on Anything Goes Weekend. Frederick in Indianapolis, Indiana. Hey, Frederick, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk to you. One quick correction. I'm actually calling from Minnesota, southeast Minnesota, near Rochester. It's District 1 there.
Oh, okay. Shall I list it as Rochester, Minnesota, then?
Yes, that's more accurate.
You got
I
it. I'll
appreciate
fix that.
Perfect. So what I wanted to talk about today is actually a couple of topics that I've seen talked on today while I was actually sitting here waiting to get on the show. We talked a little bit about Kash Patel and what this seems to be as a blind loyalty to Donald Trump. And I wanted to expand upon that because I've recently gotten my hands on a couple of the letters and emails sent out to federal employees. And I want to read one small section from their announcement on DEI and how they should be considering DEI more expansive and be looking for code phrases or any efforts to be inclusive. And the final line of this memo is, there will be no adverse consequences for timely reporting this information. However, failure to report this information within 10 days may result in adverse consequences.
Now, this information being turning in your fellow workers, right?
Correct. Turning in anyone who's proposing or pushing for these DEI policies.
Right.
And part of where this becomes alarming to me is that this isn't just, to a certain extent, the people who are concerned about immigration calling ICE, calling these agencies and reporting people. They're actually trying to mandate a push towards this exclusion of people based upon all of these different factors. And, you know, any efforts to do that really to me seems like they're crossing over this line that exists where the government, you know, they're no longer pretending that they're serving the people in this case. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, but I actually wanted to expand on the idea of not being heard by our government representatives a little bit further. And Tom, if I can, I'd like to dive into my own personal experience here in District 1 of Minnesota. My representative is Brad Finstad. I have been calling his office sometimes a couple of times a day to raise concerns around, you know, a variety of things, proportional use of violence in foreign conflicts, things here like the separation of kids, this Guantanamo Bay situation. And in about 18 months of calling, I have asked for requests both on specific policy and legislation, as well as sort of moral concerns about his stances. And in all that time, I've gotten 2 responses from Brad Finstad. And this kind of continues more because the next step for me is contacting my governor or my senators, and I'm really not getting any type of response from them ever. So what I wanted to touch on is something that you had an older gentleman on a few minutes ago, and he talked about this push towards the Civil War. I don't want to talk about this Civil War as if it's going to be, you know, red coats and blue coats and lining up across from each other in fields, because I think that there is a real push for people who don't feel heard by their government to resort to acts like violence. And I think that's a very real possibility, not in a Civil War capacity, but definitely in this possibility for escalated political violence. And I think the message that I wanted to have to people, because, you know, I remember Larry's name as well. He talked about kind of checking out a little bit and taking this break. But, you know, this is the time when the other side of the aisle is going to start to have their eyes open, whether or not it's going to be right now or it's going to be after photos of Gitmo come out or really, you know, some of these policies come back to bite them. But this is the time to start reaching out, because I'm starting to see some of them turn. Some of them realize the mistakes. And I think that, you know, that's a big topic and a big ask to put on people. But when we start to recede and pull back, that's one of those key tenets of fascism that's going to allow them to continue to take away those rights. We have strength when we work together.
So 2 thoughts. The first is that when oligarchy really starts to bite, and we're seeing the early stages of that right now, where the oligarchs basically take over the government. You got Elon Musk now going to the Treasury Department and saying, you know, I want access to the names of everybody who gets a government check, period, and all the details. Then typically what happens is people start pushing back. And sometimes within government, sometimes just, you know, the population. And this is, you know, they're not going to be pushing back about Elon wanting our records because that's just too abstract. But they do start pushing back. And when they do, then the regime is faced with 2 choices. Either they revert back to democracy, which is, you know, what Lincoln brought about for us, and frankly what Franklin Roosevelt did in the 1930s, or they clamp down and start shooting people in the streets and imprisoning their political enemies, which is what they did in Egypt, it's what they did in Turkey, it's what they did in Hungary, it's what they did in Russia, it's what they did in the Philippines, it's what they did in Malaysia and Indonesia, it's what Modi is doing in India right now. It's, you know, I could go on. It's what Netanyahu is doing, arguably. And so at some point fairly soon, I think, the Trump administration is going to have to make a choice, and, you know, which road to go. And my guess is they're probably going to go that latter road, and that's going to be a real come to Jesus moment for the country, and particularly for many members of the Republican Party. With regard to the denunciations, where federal employees are being required to turn in their friends or neighbors, or excuse me, co-workers, if they're involved in any sort of DEI activity, which could be something as simple as just hiring a black person or a woman. You know, when I lived in Germany, one of the things that my friend Horst von Heyer, who's now passed away, he was a member of the German Nazi youth. He was 15 years old when the war ended, and you know, and had come up, you know, into the Nazi youth. He'd been in the Nazi youth from the time he was around 7 or 8. And what he told me was that when he was real young, you know, early in Hitler's reign, that all the radio stations had call-in programs where people would call in and denounce their neighbors. They'd call in and they say, you know, the Johnsons who live at 123 Acme Street have been speaking against Hitler, and somebody should look into this. And the brown shirts, the volunteers, the militias that were loyal to Hitler and later, you know, became incorporated into the army, they'd show up at those houses and they'd drag people out in the streets and beat them. Sometimes they'd set their houses on fire. Sometimes they just, you know, terrorize them.
And that's a very real concern with the January 6th pardons really clearly send a message to these groups.
Absolutely true. And this is a classic strategy of fascists. Putin's got a group called the Grey Wolves. It's a motorcycle gang. It's national. It's all across Russia. And they go out and they beat up, you know, for fun, they go out beating up mostly gay people and immigrants, dark-skinned people. But also, when Putin has political enemies, he can direct them, and he does it, you know, kind of by making public statements against people. And then suddenly those people have got a motorcycle gang kicking in their door. What's his name in Hungary? Viktor Orban. He's got a group that I'm forgetting. There's actually 3 groups in Hungary who are paramilitary groups who go around and terrorize people. You know, and so this whole denunciation thing is, I think, one of the most dangerous things that the Trump administration is doing, and one of the least covered. And I should probably write an op-ed about it, you know, invoking the German radio shows, because this, you know, I frankly, I think that's where we're going to end up. Frederick, thank you for the call. Sue in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Sue, what's up?
Hi. First of all, I want you to know I'm retired. I'm in my 70s, and I'm a widow, so I'm getting Medicare and all this stuff. My first question, I want to kind of center on the remorse of Trump voters. And there's an article I found, and I'm hoping it's a good resource. It's called the Idaho Statesman.
It's a newspaper out of Boise. It's one of the statewide newspapers. I think it's the only statewide newspaper in Idaho. I may be wrong, though. I don't live there.
Okay, what this woman, you know, trying to rewrite history, Boise woman guilty in Capitol riot rejects Trump pardon. And here's something she said. Pamela Hemphill said she was in a cult and got out and called pardons. Are you still there?
Yeah, I am. Sorry. An alarm clock just went off.
She said she was in a cult and got out and called pardons a slap in the face of police officers who were attacked.
Right.
And I'm also thinking, you know, along the same line of remorse of MAGA vote, Trump supporters. He promised on day one he would work on the price of groceries and eggs. They're going up.
Yep. And they will continue to go up, especially if he starts putting tariffs on things and his bird flu gets worse. Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing, you know, I'm concerned. The talk about cutting, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. You know, my son is a special needs young adult, and so he's on Medicaid and Medicare and SSI and SSDI. And I'm concerned about that, too. So, and I'm thinking also in terms of many of the Hispanic people who voted for Trump against their own wishes, and maybe they're having remorse, too. And I'm wondering if all these people with buyer's remorse are going to turn against him. And
well, that's what happened in 2020. You know, that's what happened in 2020. People, you know, the memory of the Trump chaos was fresh in people's minds, and so they voted for Joe Biden. I don't think it was as much a vote for Biden as it was a repudiation of Trump, and I think the proof of that was the 2024 election. But I get what you're saying, Sue, and I share your concerns. And what we're hearing right now is that the Trump administration is going to be floating proposals to means test Medicaid, which will throw millions and millions of people off Medicaid. Probably not your son, but you know, people who are not disabled. Sue, thank you for the call. I'm sorry to hear
You're
about
listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Exposing the con in conservative. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Joe in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Not much. I want to just applaud you, of course, always, but your callers are so amazing. The fellow that was talking about America joining BRICS, I'd already been working on that acronym, was calling it BRACS. But I did want to get to your list regarding some of the things I think we have to do immediately going forward. That would be a strong weapon to at least get some power back so we can restrain some of these people. I mean, the minute they were talking about opening Gitmo, I was thinking, are they going to bring back debtors' prisons? So, I mean, you can't put anything past them, but I think it's the first thing, one thing we could do is for the DNC to get rid of the only thing more objectionable than the Electoral College is get rid of the superdelegate cheat.
Yeah.
I mean, if you do the math, one superdelegate equals about 10,000 regular people votes. That's not democracy.
Well, except regular people don't vote in the Democratic Party, internal debates. But I don't disagree with you, Joe, on the one hand. On the other hand, the argument for superdelegates is that, these are people who have given basically most of their lives to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is basically a club. And so shouldn't they have a little more say in running the club? That's the argument.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, we're talking about a primary where tens of thousands of people go out and select their candidate.
But superdelegates don't have any extra votes in primaries.
That's exactly where the superdelegate vote counts.
No, primaries are open to the public.
Well,
you're not talking about primary elections. You're talking about caucuses. Or what am I missing here?
When they hold a primary, if you go up and look, just go out and look at the primary count by state, it'll have actual two different listings of counts, the voter count and the superdelegate count. And don't forget the guy that owns all the private prisons or one of those superdelegates. So there's a corporate interest involved there. But my main point here was on your list of things that we have to do going forward is we have to triple down on calling out the religious hypocrisy. Let's not forget, when they enter office, they put their hand on the Bible and they swear an oath to faithfully discharge their duties of office.
Unless they're Trump. And he refused to put his hand on the Bible because he was afraid it would catch on fire.
Yeah, but you couldn't put your hand on that Bible and swear an oath to faithfully discharge your duty and then vote for Pete Hegseth, right? They just had Kelly Loeffler. You remember Kelly Loeffler, right, from Georgia?
Yeah, the Republican.
She's up for the Small Business Administration.
Yeah.
One of the people that were speaking on her behalf of why she's qualified said it's because she loves her Lord. The majority of Catholics went Trump. The majority of Christians went Trump.
Yep.
And so I think the one thing about that minister that put that little bit of actual religious doctrine in Trump's face about showing mercy got the hugest backlash, because the one thing they don't want to do is be called out the religious hypocrisy that they use as a weapon and then vote against everything religious.
And they are hypocrites. Basically the entire Republican agenda is anti-Jesus. No, I get it. Joe, I got to run. Thanks for the call. It's about 9 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. It's Anything Goes Weekend here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
When I was just a kid, I had a wicked little plan. A paper bag of dog poop and a lighter in my hand.
I'd sneak up to a porch, set the fire to a blaze, ring the bell and run off laughing. Oh, those were the days. But now I'm seeing flashbacks, and it's not so fun. There's a grown man in the White House pulling this on everyone. Each morning there's a package, flaming bright and strong, and America's left cleaning up. Yeah, this is Trump's ding-dong. Trump's ding-dong.
Welcome back, 52 minutes past the hour. Another flaming bag from Donald Trump. That was a great call. Augusta in Cape Vincent, New York. Hey, Augusta, what's on your mind today?
Well, on my mind, sir, is the following. I'm a 91-year-old. I am actually a registered Republican. I've never voted Republican, but I am a registered Republican, probably because of my father-in-law. Anyway, I have started this letter writing to various senators about this that I believe. I believe that when Trump released 1,500 people from prisons who were convicted of insurgency, that he committed aiding and abetting crimes against our country.
I agree.
Because they were criminals.
I agree.
And I have called about 10 different people today, and I'm appalled that 8 of them said, well, I don't know if I can do that. I mean, what good is it going to do for me to call a senator who probably won't listen to me anyway? And my point is that if enough of us make these calls, whether we're right or wrong about this, and I don't believe I'm wrong, somebody's got to start paying attention to it. Because I believe that he really is aiding and abetting these insurgents. And they're out on the streets now promising to do the same things again against people who don't follow Trump. A fascist leader, listen, I grew up in the 1930s. You want to talk to me about fascism? I know. All right? I come from a family that were always voted. My father and mother were immigrants, and they always voted in this country because they believed that it was their duty to do so.
Right.
And they also talked to their representatives in the state and in the city and around, and told them what they thought. That's what we have the right to do in this country. But apparently we're not going to have that right for very much longer unless people really start, make your voice heard, not just sitting in a living room talking about it. Actually put a letter and put it to paper or put it online and send it to your senator. I think that's so important.
Amen. That was brilliant, Augusta. And also call them. The number is 202-224-3121 for the White House switch, or for the Congressional Switchboard. Give them a call, too. Augusta, thank you. That was brilliant, and I really appreciate your wisdom. Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, happy Friday, Tom. Great show today, and thanks for the compelling Hartmann reports from yesterday and today. Might I suggest emailing them to the new DNC chair? Because for the next 2 years, we're going to need a Democratic Party that is relentless in painting Trump and the Republicans as a party of oligarchy, and one, as you say in your piece, that has grifted and gutted $50 trillion from the middle class since Reagan. And if we don't stop them now, they'll keep going until they have every last dollar. As you said yesterday, they laid the groundwork for this grand theft by using the fear of a Soviet-style takeover of America and capitalism. And as we see, they're going to continue to use fear to distract us. And that fear is fear of the other, the fear of immigrants, the fear of trans people, the fear of DEI, in other words, black and brown people, et cetera, et cetera. So if the Democrats don't fight fire with fire, Tom, this is how we go from oligarchy to fascism. And this is why, myself and I think you agree, we call MAGA a neo-Confederate and neo-fascist movement. And finally, Tom, hopefully there's going to be a few Republicans with enough self-respect to reject these dangerous nominees like Gabbard, Patel, and RFK Jr. What do you say?
I hope so. I'm with you, Jeff, and I hope so. We'll find out next week. Jeff, thank you for the call. And thanks for being with us today. Special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Nigel Peacock, Sue Nethercutt, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jay LeBlanc, Jeremy Peterson, Connor Arroyo, Carna Verity, Martha Salinas, Mateo Robertson, Diane Russell, and Ruben Michaels, all the folks who work on this program. Thank you. And thank you to you for calling in, for spreading the good word. And get out there, get active, tag You're It. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll catch up with you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!